Chapter 861. Marquis Swordstar's 7-star point kill sword art had already reached the 4th strike 3 years ago. I wonder if he has succeeded in cultivating the 5th strike. If he has, then Yi Chen has no hope of victory. Luo Tianju creased his brows. As the second ranker of the last life and death substitute list, it was impossible for him to not have exchanged blows with Marquis Swordstar. 10 years ago, Marquis Swordstar had only managed to complete the 3rd strike, but it was precisely this strike that made his defense unable to withstand a single blow. In the following 7 years, Luo Tianju's strength had improved greatly. He originally wanted to exchange pointers with Marquis Swordstar, but after learning that Marquis Swordstar had successfully cultivated the 4th strike, he gave up on the idea. Marquis Swordstar and Yi Chen? A trace of graveness appeared on Marquis Swordsnow's delicate face. These two couldn't be underestimated, especially Marquis Swordstar. His 7-star point kill sword art was an ancient sword art with boundless might. It was said that the 2nd strike of the 7-star point kill sword art was twice as powerful as the 1st strike, and the 3rd strike was twice as powerful as the 2nd strike, and so on. At the 6th strike realm, one could kill a dragon of the same level, and at the 7th strike realm, one could kill an ordinary life and death king with the strength of a strongest half-step king. Marquis Swordstar looked to be in his 30s. He had sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, and was rather handsome. He wore a spacious spruce robe that fluttered in the wind as if it was weightless, giving off a feeling that he was as light as a feather. Yi Chen, on the other hand, looked much younger. He looked to be in his early 20s, clad in blue robes. His eyes were calm, but not shallow. His pitch-black pupils seemed like an abyss that could contain everything. The two sword artists slowly walked toward each other. When they were 100 meters apart, the two stopped. This sword. Greedy wolf sword. Marquis Swordstar unsheathed his long sword, which flickered with a cold light and overflowed with killing intent. Indeed, a sword also had a killing intent, and it was even purer than a human's. Evil vanquishing sword. Although Yi Chen's evil vanquishing sword wasn't unsheathed, under Yi Chen's urging, it was still slightly unsheathed. Just a little bit caused an upright and imposing sword chi to spread out. Good sword. Marquis Swordstar's eyes lit up. Yi Chen's evil vanquishing sword was not inferior to his greedy wolf sword. It could be said to be one of the best pseudo-supreme grade swords. Be careful, I will do my best. Holding sword of greedy wolf in his hand, Marquis Swordstar's eyes gradually turned cold. 7-star instant kill, first kill. Originally, everyone thought that Marquis Swordstar would use other sword arts to probe Yi Chen. Who would have thought that he would directly use the 7-star point kill sword art? Puff. The 7 stars point kill was killing lives. Starlight flashed before Yi Chen's eyes, and he felt a cold and merciless sword chi rushing towards him. This sword chi came so suddenly and so strangely. Ding! Unsheathing his evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen looked straight ahead. His sword flew and broke through the sword chi. Second strike, star flash. Swish. Marquis Swordstar's figure flickered like a star. He suddenly darkened, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of Yi Chen. Sword of greedy wolf, carrying the purest killing intent, stabbed forward. The second strike contained a footwork art within the sword art, and the two complemented each other. This sword was unbelievably fast. The footwork and sword art seemed to have fused into one, and borrowing the momentum of the charge, the sword art's might was raised to a whole new level. If Lan Sanmei's blade art was a vibrational power, then Marquis Swordsnow's freezing sword was a compressed power. Marquis Swordstar's was a piercing power, which could pierce through even more powerful objects. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. Yi Chen raised the evil vanquishing sword horizontally and blocked Marquis Swordstar's second strike. However, the piercing power contained in Sword of Greedy Wolf was not so easy to deal with. Yi Chen's feet rubbed against the ground and slid forward, leaving behind dazzling sparks. Third strike, star extinction. Marquis Swordstar was unforgiving. Retracting Sword of Greedy Wolf, he thrust out once again. This time, the speed of the piercing power was even faster than the previous one. Is this Marquis Swordstar? Too ruthless. Sword after sword, Yi Chen simply can't retaliate. Worthy of being Marquis Swordstar. When he makes his move, it's a killing strike. In such a short period of time, the spectators naturally didn't have the time to speak. However, the same thought flashed through their minds. Swish, Marquis Swordstar's strike had missed, not because his accuracy was lacking, but because Yi Chen's evil vanquishing sword had collided with his sword of greedy wolf. What shocked him was that Yi Chen's sword actually contained a high-frequency vibration power. The vibration power was transmitted to sword of greedy wolf through the point of collision, causing his strike to lose more than half of its power. Vibration power. Lan Sanmei's eyes opened wide. When did he learn a sword art containing vibration power? Moreover, it didn't seem to be much weaker than hers. Learned it on the spur of the moment. Impossible. Are there still some differences between the two? Marquis Sword Snow's first thought was that Yi Chen had learned Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts and then transformed it into a sword art. However, he immediately denied this thought. Demonic blade arts were not comprehending profound, and required thousands of tempering before one could make any progress. If one's body wasn't familiar with the vibration power, it would be impossible to use vibration sword arts in a short period of time. Moreover, he could see the difference between Yi Chen's vibration sword arts and Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts. Demonic blade arts used the vibration of the blade to push the energy vibration from inside to outside, while Yi Chen's vibration sword arts seemed to use the metal profound to push the sword art from outside to inside. It was hard to say which one was better. Swish. Failing his strike, Marquis Swordstar's figure flickered as he retreated and looked at Yi Chen in bewilderment. Yi Chen didn't look at Marquis Swordstar. Instead, he raised his head and looked at Lan Sanmei's small chamber. Although the chamber's transparent crystal couldn't be seen from the outside, looking at me, Lan Sanmei noticed Yi Chen's gaze. Retracting his gaze, a faint smile appeared on the corner of Yi Chen's mouth. Speaking of which, this vibration sword art was inspired by Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts. In his early years, he had once bought a profound martial art, Golden Resonant Radiance, in an auction. Golden Resonant Radiance, from its name, had the word vibration in it, so it naturally contained the power of vibration. However, Golden Resonant Radiance made energy vibrate, which was sword light or sword chi. It didn't involve the vibration of the blade itself. Relying on this sword art, Yi Chen had always been successful. However, as time passed, Golden Resonant Radiance had gradually fallen behind. Relying on energy vibrations alone, it was hard for him to deal with experts at the same level. However, Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts had given Yi Chen a new inspiration. The demonic blade arts allowed the blade to vibrate first, and then used the blade as a medium to vibrate the energy. With the two stacked together, its power would be shocking. Be it close combat or long-range combat, it would be ridiculously powerful. In that case, why didn't he change his Golden Resonant Radiance? It should be known that his Gold Profound had already reached 90% completion, which gave him a huge innate advantage. Even normal Golden Resonant Radiance would not be weak in his hands. Barring the fact that the opponent was a top martial genius, even a normal top half-step king warrior might not be able to block it. Once the Golden Resonant Radiance was improved, its power would increase by several times, or even 10 times, becoming yet another powerful ace of Yi Chen. A lot of things require an opportunity. This time, it can be considered as an opportunity for the Golden Resonant Radiance to be reborn. Previously, when cultivating Golden Resonant Radiance, Yi Chen had a deep understanding of vibration power. Coupled with his 90% completion of Gold Profound, his foundation was extremely solid. Therefore, merely by observing Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts, Yi Chen grasped a unique vibration sword art. He used energy vibrations to vibrate the blade, from outside to inside, and then from inside to outside. I understand a lot about vibration power, but my body still can't adapt to it. I can't push it to a higher realm. Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Knowing was one thing, but being able to use it was another. He was not Lan Sanmei, who had cultivated demonic blade arts for so many years that his body had adapted to the vibration power. Powerful. You actually broke my third strike with vibration sword arts. Marquis Swordstar's eyes flickered with a cold fanaticism. Fourth strike, Star Shower. Taking a deep breath, Marquis Swordstar took a step forward and launched a sneak attack. The sword of greedy wolf in his hand pierced out hundreds of times in an instant. Each strike contained a powerful force, and each strike blossomed with resplendent starlight. This starlight rubbed against the space, making it as hard as a diamond. This is the fourth strike. Luo Tianju stared at the scene below through the crystal. Let's call you vibrational sword arts. Yi Chen gave up on the idea of using vibrational sword arts to deal with Marquis Swordstar's fourth strike. He wasn't too familiar with vibrational sword arts, and couldn't use them to perfection. Using the unfamiliar vibrational sword arts against the enemy would clearly be using his weak point to deal with the enemy's strong point. After all, the might of the fourth strike was more than double that of the third strike. Sword domain. An enormous sword pressure burst out of Yi Chen's body and instantly acted on Marquis Swordstar. It's sword pressure. Marquis Swordstar would never forget the scene of Yi Chen killing young undying demon lord with a single strike. However, he had still underestimated the might of this sword pressure. His body suddenly turned sluggish, and a flaw appeared in the fourth strike. A cold star shone as Yi Chen took out his sword. Poochie. Blood sprayed out as a sword scar appeared on Marquis Swordstar's cheek. At the critical moment, he had forcefully shifted his body, dodging the sure-kill strike. Break. Blood leaked out of the corner of Marquis Swordstar's mouth. Having his fourth strike interrupted made him suffer a huge backlash. His Zhen Yuan surged, and the sword of greedy wolf in his hand burst out with an intense yet not dazzling moonlight. With a sweep of the sword, a large amount of moonlight burst out, covering the entire secret chamber in a flash. Moonlight Chop. Marquis Swordstar's self-created profound sword art. Waning Moon. Marquis Swordstar's moonlight chop was pale yellow, while Yi Chen's waning moon was immeasurably black. One black and one pale yellow, two different colors collided, each occupying half of the chamber. Peng. Chi waves erupted as the two were sent flying back. The only difference was that Marquis Swordstar had spurted out a huge mouthful of blood. Forcefully shifting his body had already injured his internal organs, and the interruption of his fourth strike aggravated his injuries. Then, he clashed with Yi Chen, causing him to finally lose control. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Marquis Swordstar said coldly, "You should be honored to be the first person to witness the fifth strike of 7-star point kill sword art. Once I use this sword, even I can't control it." Chapter 862. The battle between Yi Chen and Marquis Swordstar was completely out of everyone's expectations. They didn't think that the one to suffer would be Marquis Swordstar. Marquis Swordstar's 7-star point kill sword art was indeed powerful. If it were any other sword artist apart from Marquis Sword Snow and Yi Chen, they might not even be able to receive the first strike. However, Yi Chen seemed to be a person who could create miracles. He received the first strike as if it was eating or drinking, and the second strike was also blocked by him without a single injury. The third strike was cancelled out by his vibration sword arts, and the fourth strike was forcibly interrupted by a huge sword pressure. This was the turning point, as well as the beginning of Marquis Swordstar's loss. Everyone on the scene had no choice but to admit that they had underestimated Yi Chen. Yi Chen's sword arts were indeed not as gorgeous as Marquis Sword Snow's, nor as murderous as Marquis Swordstar's. However, his sword arts had always been efficient. They didn't need to be gorgeous or murderous, they just needed to receive the opponent's sword and injure them. It could be said that Yi Chen's sword arts had thrown away the unnecessary things, leaving only the purest essence. His sword Dao was different from others. However, his sword arts were undoubtedly powerful, and his perception and reaction were also top-notch. To deal with him, one could only use absolute strength or powerful killing moves. Hearing Marquis Swordstar say that he was going to use the fifth strike of 7-star point kill sword art, everyone's gazes fell on Yi Chen, wondering how Yi Chen would deal with it. Yi Chen's sword arts were, of course, indisputable. However, no matter how powerful a sword art was, it would still have a limit. Beyond that limit, no matter how powerful a sword art was, it would be useless. When two people were equally matched in strength, the only way to decide the victor was to use a trump card. Moreover, a trump card could often be used to defeat a stronger opponent. Sure enough, his created the fifth strike. Luo Tianju sighed inwardly. Without even exchanging blows, he already knew that he was not Marquis Swordstar's opponent. He didn't even have the confidence to receive the 4th strike, let alone the 5th. 7-star point kill sword ART's 5th strike, this freak. Fortunately, I also succeeded in reverting, or there would be no hope at all. Young Elephant Lord's lips twitched. 5th kill? Yi Chen's brows slightly creased. In truth, if he didn't use bewitching mirror shattering, his strength wouldn't be much higher than Marquis Swordstar's. After all, the difference in cultivation base was obvious. He was at the 2nd layer of Life and Death Chamber, while his opponent was at the peak of the 3rd layer. Be it the quantity or quality of Zhen Yuan, there was a big gap. Moreover, the age difference between the two was more than 10 years, which meant that Marquis Swordstar had more than 10 years to study sword arts. If he didn't use bewitching mirror shattering, Yi Chen wouldn't be able to kill a peak-level evil spirit. The recovery ability of peak-level evil spirits allowed them to ignore the majority of attacks. For example, Marquis Swordstar, Xiong Xiaolong, Luo Tianju, and the others could still put up a fight against a peak-level evil spirit. However, after a long time, they would be worn down to death by the evil spirit, since their moves couldn't kill it in one go. Looks like I can only expose my sword domain. Earlier, Yi Chen had merely released his sword domain slightly, and he'd utilized his sword pressure to freeze others in place. He hadn't truly revealed the might of his sword domain at all. 5th strike, Star Fall. Marquis Swordstar's figure flew over with a speed that couldn't be described with words. He was like an aurora in the universe, piercing through the endless void and pouncing toward Yi Chen. What was more frightening was that before this strike was released, Marquis Swordstar, who had become one with sword greed, emitted a star force field. This star force field wasn't unique to Marquis Swordstar, but the star energy contained in Starfall. Marquis Swordstar was confident that this strike would kill Yi Chen. Even if Yi Chen's sword pressure were to land on him, the star force field would cancel out the majority of it. The remaining force wouldn't be enough to affect his body and sword trajectory. Danger! Luo Tianju's hair stood on end as he stared unblinkingly. This strike is too frightening. As a sword artist himself, Lu Xiaoyou's heart almost stopped. He was shaken by the might of this strike. He had a feeling that even if there were 3 of him, he would still be killed by this strike without the slightest suspense. A single strike drawing upon the core power of stars, worthy of being an ancient sword art. Marquis Sword Snow's eyes shone, wishing that he could replace Yi Chen and fight Marquis Swordstar. He wanted to see if his freezing sword could contend against Marquis Swordstar's 5th strike. It's over. Marquis Swordstar sent out Greedy Wolf, bursting with power to the limit. At this moment, Greedy Wolf burst out with a star-like radiance, incomparably fast and resplendent. Starfall. The deathlight of stars falling. This Marquis Swordstar is only a step away from life and death realm. Yi Chen's expression changed. Starfall contained the Tao of Death, which meant that the opponent wasn't far from life and death realm. Life and death realm naturally required one to comprehend life and death. Sword domain. Not daring to be careless, Yi Chen operated Green Lotus sword arts with all his strength, completely releasing the might of sword domain. It's useless. Marquis Swordstar's sword was less than 10 meters away from Yi Chen. Time seemed to slow down as the sword tip, which contained the light of exploding stars, inched closer to Yi Chen's forehead. Sword rule. Yi Chen inwardly chanted. In the next instant, a horrifying scene occurred. Marquis Swordstar's Shawkill strike unexpectedly deviated, as if there was some sort of rule around Yi Chen, and this rule was under Yi Chen's control. Impossible. Marquis Swordstar roared inwardly. The flow of time suddenly sped up. Of course, this was just an illusion. Poochie. Marquis Swordstar's Shawkill strike missed, and the deviation was inconceivably large. In that instant, the evil vanquishing sword in Yi Chen's hand shot out, piercing Marquis Swordstar's throat. Due to the inertia of Marquis Swordstar's body, the evil vanquishing sword cut through half of his neck, causing blood to spurt everywhere like a fountain. Pang! Marquis Swordstar fell to the ground and slid down, no longer breathing. As for Yi Chen, he didn't budge an inch. Sword domain. It's sword domain. At this moment, Someone finally cried out in alarm. He actually has a sword artist's domain. Sword domain. Marquis Sword Snow said word by word in a low voice. Sword domain was the domain of sword artists. Even among life and death sword kings, only a handful possessed sword domain. A sword artist who practiced the sword every day, every month, and every year would emit an intense sword chi. When the cultivation method was also a sword Dao cultivation method, the two would resonate. This kind of resonance would not appear normally, but when the sword Dao cultivation method broke through to heaven grade and the sword artist's comprehension of the sword Dao reached an unfathomable height, this resonance would erupt and form sword domain. Sword domain could greatly affect swordsmen without sword domain. As long as you were a swordsman, even if you had a sword in your hand or in your heart, you wouldn't be able to escape this kind of influence. This was a profound influence, because sword domain was the essence of sword Dao. Any form that was expressed by a sword would be within its range of influence. Of course, if one wanted to influence a sword artist with similar or higher strength, the sword domain had to contain its own rule, which was the sword rule. Once the sword rule was born, the sword domain could be considered to be in its initial form. I've finally found a sword artist that I can't see the outcome of. A frightening battle intent burst out from Marquis Sword Snow's eyes. If someone were to be alone with him, they would certainly be shocked. Was this still the boy next door Marquis Sword Snow? As soon as the sword domain appeared, Yi Chen became incomparably frightening in everyone's eyes. Sword domain might seem like bullying, but how could a person who possessed sword domain have any achievements on the sword Dao that ordinary people could imagine? Could an ordinary sword artist raise their sword Dao cultivation method to heaven grade? Could an ordinary sword artist reach an unfathomable height on the sword Dao? It was impossible. Therefore, possessing sword domain was the manifestation of a sword artist's talent. Losing was very normal, and there was no one to blame but the fact that one's achievements in the way of the sword could not compare. There's actually someone outside my Sky Sword continent who possesses sword domain, and it's not a life and death sword king. In the small chamber, Marquis Sword Star sucked in a deep breath, feeling extremely shocked. In all of Elysium, those who possessed sword domain were all in Sky Sword continent. For sword artists, Sky Sword continent was a place blessed by the heavens. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called Sky Sword continent. Yi Chen possessing sword domain was simply an anomaly. Huff. Slowly letting out a breath, Yi Chen put away the evil vanquishing sword. In truth, Marquis Sword Star's starfall was not much inferior to bewitching mirror shattering in terms of killing power. Although it still couldn't kill a peak-level evil spirit, it could kill a life form with strength similar to that of a peak-level evil spirit. This was not an issue of strength, but a peak-level evil spirit's recovery ability. Starfall emphasized on the power of piercing, and a peak-level evil spirit wouldn't die even if it was pierced several hundred times. If not for sword domain giving birth to a trace of sword rules, Yi Chen would have to use bewitching mirror shattering to defeat Marquis Sword Star. I reckon that after this life and death secret realm closes, he will become a life and death king within a few years. Before returning to his small chamber, Yi Chen glanced at Marquis Sword Star's chamber. Because the battle between Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Star was too shocking, the first dozen battles of the 25th round were not worth watching at all. Everyone's appetite had been whetted. However, this situation didn't last long. That was because in the 25th point battle, another two top contenders for the top 5 would meet, Xu Jing against Lan Sanmei. Lan Sanmei's strength was frightening, but she encountered Xu Jing. As a golden dragon, Xu Jing's hidden strength was something even Yi Chen didn't know. He only knew that in her battle against Lan Sanmei, Xu Jing easily defeated her. Demonic blade arts were directly disintegrated by Xu Jing's fist. Yi Chen's opponent in the 25th round was Chu Zhongtian. The result could be easily imagined. 26th round, 27th round. Every round had one or two spectacular battles. In the 28th round, Marquis Sword Snow faced Luo Tianju. In the end, Luo Tianju lost. Marquis Sword Snow didn't seem frightened by Yi Chen's sword domain at all. Everyone could see his battle intent rising. Chapter 863. Could it be that this Marquis Sword Snow still has some trump cards? Many people were doubtful. After defeating Luo Tianju, Marquis Sword Snow glanced in Yi Chen's direction, the battle intent in his eyes unconcealed. Hey! Yi Chen's expression changed slightly. He didn't know where Marquis Sword Snow's confidence came from, but it couldn't be groundless. The other side must have some trump cards. There weren't many battles that could attract Yi Chen's attention. As for ordinary battles, Yi Chen naturally chose to ignore them and immersed himself in studying vibrational sword arts. Vibrational sword arts were derived from the golden resonant radiant sword art, and therefore, counted as a metal profound sword art. Metal profound was a profound, so it naturally couldn't vibrate. However, Jin Yuan containing metal profound could vibrate. Vibrating with Jin Yuan would cause the sword to vibrate, which in turn would strengthen the vibrations of Jin Yuan. This was Yi Chen's path of development, and it could be said to be the complete opposite of Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts. Of course, the effects were basically the same. Due to the dragon power in his body and the undying body, Yi Chen's body's endurance was extremely high, almost on par with Lan Sanmei, who had been cultivating demonic blade arts for many years. The only thing he needed to do was to familiarize his body with the vibrational power and maximize the efficiency without any loss. This was a process that required thousands of tempering. Fortunately, Yi Chen's soul power was 5 times that of an ordinary person, and his familiarity with his body was also far greater than an ordinary person's, saving him a lot of time. Kai. Taking out a mid-grade sword, Yi Chen slashed out, and the sword light turned blurry. Pa. How could a mid-grade sword bear such a high frequency of vibrations? Taking out another high-grade sword, Yi Chen once again used vibrational sword arts. Creak. The vibrational power contained in vibrational sword arts was too powerful. Although the high-grade sword in his hand didn't break, it was still damaged, with fine cracks appearing on its surface. Seems like using vibrational sword arts requires a peak high-grade sword. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to use it. Yi Chen shook his head. Right now, his usage of the vibrational sword spell had not reached perfection yet. Even normal upper-rank greatswords would not be able to handle it. If he were to train the spell to completion, perhaps only a semi-extreme rank greatsword would be able to let him use it smoothly. However, a semi-extreme greatsword would not be safe in a battle. After a couple of exchanges, it would probably be useless. A battle at the same level would not be easy to deal with. In the third battle of the 28th round, Yi Chen and Lan Sanmei. I can use it as a reference. Yi Chen was clear that Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts contained more vibrational power than his. If he could exchange blows with her using vibrational sword arts, he would gain a lot of experience and comprehension. Standing in front of Lan Sanmei, Yi Chen took out his evil shattering sword. Be careful. Lan Sanmei seemed to have seen through Yi Chen's thoughts. His figure flashed, slashing out with a normal blade attack. Holding the evil shattering sword, Yi Chen met it head-on. Clang. Spatial ripples spread out from the place where the sword and blade clashed. What a powerful vibrational power! Yi Chen could feel the vibrational power of vibrational sword arts clashing with demonic blade arts. In the end, the latter's vibrational power was slightly more powerful, transmitting to the evil shattering sword. Although the remaining vibrational power was very weak and couldn't do anything to Yi Chen, its power couldn't be underestimated. Clang 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 clang, the two exchanged dozens of blows in an instant, causing spatial ripples to spread out. I'm going to use demonic chop now. Lan Sanmei reminded Yi Chen. Many thanks. How could Yi Chen not see that Lan Sanmei wanted to help him experience the vibrational power? He was grateful. The black saber light turned indistinct, and the space around it was torn apart. Lan Sanmei had gone all out with this devil execution, not holding back at all. Wang. The evil shattering sword vibrated at a high frequency, emitting the sound of bees flapping their wings. Holding his sword with both hands, Yi Chen took a few steps forward and raised his sword to block Lan Sanmei's demonic blade. Ang! This time, it wasn't just the space that rippled. The shattered blade light and sword light that contained vibrational power spread out, creating shallow pits in the secret room. The ear-piercing sound of metal scraping against metal made one's heart beat faster. Bang, bang, bang. His body stiffened. Yi Chen almost lost his grip on the evil shattering sword. The vibrational power that erupted from the demonic chop had reached the limit, greatly exceeding his vibrational sword art. If Yi Chen's trump card was the vibrational sword art, then Yi Chen would have already lost. Because when his body stiffened, it would inevitably cause a pause, and Lan Sanmai could use this time to kill him. Thanks. Yi Chen sheathed his sword and stood still. Exchanging pointers is also beneficial to me. It's very difficult to find someone who isn't much weaker than me in terms of vibrational power. Exchanging pointers between people who cultivated the same power was the best way to increase their strength. The process of testing each other was also a process of improvement. This battle ended with Lan Sanmai admitting defeat. Yi Chen felt somewhat apologetic. If it wasn't for the life and death stone, he would have admitted defeat. An empty reputation didn't have much attraction to him. The final battle of the 28th round was the battle between Young Elephant Lord and Xu Jing. Young Elephant Lord's strength naturally didn't need to be mentioned. In the previous battles, he had already defeated many popular characters. His strength was enough to shake the heavens and shake the earth, definitely exceeding 1,000,000 jin. Even Dantai Mingyue's teleportation art couldn't do much in front of him. Young Elephant Lord punched out, and the powerful force directly distorted the trajectory of the space, preventing Dantai Mingyu from teleporting. On the other hand, Xu Jing could be said to be one of the strongest contenders for the top 3 this time. Lan Sanmei's strength was very powerful. In the battle against Marquis Sword Snow, he had cut off one of the latter's arms. However, against Xu Jing, he lost without any suspense. Xu Jing's strength was extremely condensed, and vibrational power had no effect on her. The battle between Young Elephant Lord and Xu Jing was definitely the strongest confrontation in this point battle, and there was no one else like it. Your strength is very powerful, not below mine. If you're willing to be my woman, I don't mind losing to you. Young Elephant Lord didn't have much need for life and death stones. He had already reached the peak of the 3rd layer of life and death chamber, and a few life and death stones couldn't help him break through. Ridiculous. A sneer appeared on Xu Jing's face. Humph. Don't think that you're undefeatable just because your strength is more or less the same as mine. My Battle Elephant sect cultivates physical strength as its foundation, and some secret arts can even multiply my strength. Young Elephant Lord's face sank. Poison Dragon Fist. Xu Jing didn't feel like wasting words with Young Elephant Lord. Golden flames erupted from her body as she punched at Young Elephant Lord's chest. The fist was so fast that it seemed like cannon fire. Battle Elephant Fist. Young Elephant Lord had long since been on guard against Xu Jing. Seeing the incoming fist, he clenched his right hand and punched back. The two fists collided, immediately creating a huge explosion. The air in the entire secret room exploded, as if countless bombs had exploded at the same time. At the edge of the two fists, the space was shattered and twisted, like silk or snakes. Star-shattering fist. Xu Jing didn't retreat and punched again. The light in the chamber immediately dimmed, and the stars flickered as a shattered star imprinted itself on Young Elephant Lord's position. Elephant King Protection. Young Elephant Lord crossed his arms, and a huge elephant phantom condensed from demonic beast energy enveloped him. Rumble. The might of Star-shattering fist was boundless. If Xu Jing had entered life and death realm, this fist could even shatter a relatively small star. Even with the protection of his energy secret art, Young Elephant Lord's entire body was sent flying. His blood and chi surged, and his face flushed red. Elephant King roar. He couldn't let Xu Jing attack like this. Young Elephant Lord sucked in a deep breath, and his chest swelled up like a small mountain. He opened his mouth and let out a thunderous roar. Spatial ripples surged, and a ring of transparent light spread out with him as the center, expelling all the airflow. Xu Jing's body was obstructed for a moment, and she couldn't follow up with another attack. I'll let you see the power of my strongest secret art and my ancestor atavism. Demonic beasts that cultivated energy didn't need to revert to their original form to fight. After all, human form was the most suitable for erupting power. Although demonic beast form had 10 times the power, it was too scattered. It was like the difference between a piece of wood and an embroidery needle. The embroidery needle could easily pierce through the wood. Young Elephant Lord was still in human form, but his nose had changed. It kept extending and turning into an elephant's trunk. His body had also widened, and his muscles and bones had thickened by several folds. Before, he was only 2 meters tall, but now, he was close to 3 meters tall. Standing there, he looked like a small mountain or a wall. 8 desolate mammoth fists. Bursting with energy, young Elephant Lord's right fist blasted toward Xu Jing with a savage aura. Everyone felt like they could hear the trumpeting of 100 elephants from the desolate era. It's just a heaven-class high-grade secret art. Second-rank sacred dragon fist. Xu Jing punched out, and her golden energy condensed into a sacred golden dragon that rushed out. The golden dragon was fierce and tyrannical. It easily broke through young Elephant Lord's fist energy and circled around his body. Fart. Young Elephant Lord directly turned into a bloody mist. Is she still human? Could she be a dragon? Xu Jing's violence left everyone dumbfounded, including Yi Chen. He was sure that Xu Jing's punch could kill a peak evil spirit. A dragon's power really can't be calculated with common sense. Moreover, it's a high-level existence among dragons, the golden dragon. Yi Chen quickly accepted the golden dragon's incomprehensible strength. The possibility of her being a dragon is very low. She should be a sub-dragon with a dragon's bloodline. Marquis Swordstar didn't know what Xu Jing's identity was, but in his opinion, it was impossible for dragons to exist in Elysium. The terror of dragons was recorded in the 7-star point kill sword art. Even if he cultivated the 7-star point kill sword art to the 6th strike realm, he would only be able to kill an ordinary dragon of the same level. Moreover, he hadn't even grasped the 5th strike yet. It could be said that dragons were a race above demons, several levels higher than humans. However, dragons had always been rare, which was their disadvantage. Chapter 864. The 28th round came to an end, and the 29th round began. The points battle was nearing its end. However, many people's mood was getting more and more excited, because the pinnacle battles had yet to come to an end. Marquis Sword Snow, Yi Chen, and Xu Jing, the 3 of them had yet to taste defeat. It was still unknown who would have the last laugh. Apart from them, although Marquis Swordstar, Luo Tianju, and young Elephant Lord Lan Sanmai had all lost, their strength was obvious to all. Therefore, their peak battles were still very attractive to the spectators. In the 12th match of the 29th round, Yi Chen's opponent was Luo Tianju. As the head of True Spirit Continent's 7 heroes and the second ranker of the previous life and death substitute list, Luo Tianju's strength was not something that anyone dared to look down on. Although Marquis Sword Snow had defeated him, he had also suffered some injuries. 9 Dragons Protection. Facing Yi Chen, Luo Tian didn't dare to be careless. True Essence surged and 9 thick thunder dragons condensed around his body, each containing the profound of thunder and earth. The 9 Dragons barrier was not just a simple defensive martial skill, it was 70% defense and 30% offense. As the thunder dragons roared, 2 of them swooped down towards Yi Chen. Bang 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 bang, Luo Tianju was the most balanced youth in terms of offense and defense. No one would be able to easily defeat him. Yi Chen used the spiritual sword and waning moon to fight with him. The 2 of them were getting closer and closer, and the battle was getting more and more intense. Sword Domain. The majestic sword pressure acted on Luo Tianju's body, causing him to freeze. Spin. Under the immense pressure, the other 7 lightning dragons around Luo Tianju forced themselves to move, circling around Luo Tianju and doing their best to minimize any openings. Buzz. Although the spiritual sword was fast, it needed to hit a vital point to be fatal. With the 7 lightning dragons protecting him, Luo Tianju's vital points were not exposed at all. Thus, Yi Chen gave up on using the spiritual sword. Activating the vibrational sword art, his sword pierced through the gaps between the lightning dragons and landed on Luo Tianju's abdomen. Bang! The intense vibrating energy passed through the tip of the sword and into Luo Tianju's body. In the next moment, Luo Tianju vomited blood, and the 7 lightning dragons around him dissipated. Yi Chen won. The older generation of young experts have been defeated one after another, and it's not just once or twice. Some of the spectators sighed with emotion. This era is a great era, far surpassing the past. The new geniuses that have emerged are all terrifying to the extreme. In the past few decades, the most dazzling one was Shenhu, but now, there are already 3 who seem to be able to compete with Shenhu. The 28th match was a heavyweight match. Marquis Sword Snow had few partners. Young Elephant Lord's 8 Desolation Ferocious Elephant Fist was immeasurably powerful. Although he hadn't cultivated it to completion, it was still somewhat comparable to the War Elephant ancestor. Roar! The nearly 3-meter-tall young Elephant Lord crazily rushed over, his huge fists drilling towards Marquis Sword Snow like drills. Freezing Sword. The snow-white long sword in Marquis Sword Snow's hand pierced forth. Ka-la-la. Young Elephant Lord's fist was sealed in ice, and the ice was a meter thick. In the next moment, young Elephant Lord's arm was completely shattered. Of course, Marquis Sword Snow didn't have it easy either. His whole body was blasted away by the 8 desolate mammoth fist's power, spurting out a few mouthfuls of steaming blood. Snow dance in the sky. Snow filled the sky as Marquis Sword Snow's body twisted in the air, dealing with young Elephant Lord with a single sword strike. Sure enough, young Elephant Lord isn't Marquis Sword Snow's opponent. I wonder who's stronger between Marquis Sword Snow and Marquis Sword Star. Although Marquis Sword Star lost to Yi Chen, it was because he was restrained by Sword Domain. The existence of Sword Domain increases the gap between sword artists by several folds, or even tenfold. Seriously speaking, Marquis Sword Star's 7-star killing sword ART's 5th strike is a killer move. Marquis Sword Star's 5th strike had shocked many people. The light emitted by that strike was the death light of falling stars. Just looking at it would give one a feeling of death, not to mention facing it head-on. If Yi Chen didn't have Sword Domain, he would most likely have been killed by that strike without any chance to retaliate. Of course, many people were wondering if Yi Chen had any other trump cards. That was a possibility. Although Sword Domain was powerful, it was more effective against sword artists. Against other experts, it was less effective. Therefore, it was not a big deal to expose it. In any case, not everyone was a sword artist. At most, they would be suppressed a little. Putting themselves in others' shoes, if one was a sword artist with a powerful trump card and Sword Domain, one would definitely choose to expose the Sword Domain first and save the trump card for last. However, this was only everyone's guess. Until the last moment, no one could know the result. In the 33rd match, Marquis Sword Star stepped onto the stage. His opponent was Lan Sanmai. Although the Life and Death Palace's point battle had not ended yet, in everyone's opinion, Lan Sanmai's strength was definitely in the top 5. His final ranking might also be in the top 5. Young Elephant Lord and Luo Tianju might not necessarily be Lan Sanmai's opponents. This could be seen from the battle between Lan Sanmai and Marquis Sword Snow. Of course, the probability of Lan Sanmai losing to Marquis Sword Star was more than 90%. Therefore, the highest he could reach was 5th. Demonic Chop. After taking on Marquis Sword Star's first 3 strikes, Lan Sanmai activated the Demonic Blade and used Demonic Chop with an extremely powerful vibration power. The black blade light turned blurry and slashed through space, slashing toward Marquis Sword Star. 4th strike, Star Shower. Relying on the momentum of the thrust, Marquis Sword Star stabbed out dozens of times in a row, each of them possessing a terrifying penetrative power. Ding ding dang dang. Puff. Lan Sanmai's shoulder and abdomen each received a strike, causing blood to gush out like water. Annihilation Chop. Lan Sanmai knew that she was not Marquis Sword Star's opponent. However, she wanted to experience the power of Marquis Sword Star's 5th strike from a close distance. It would be very useful for her to experience the Tao of Death. As you wish. Marquis Sword Star's 5th strike came out. His body turned into a beam of light as he pierced out. His sword tip erupted with a starry light, looking exceptionally brilliant. This is the Tao of Death. Lan Sanmai's throat received a strike, and the vitality in her body was completely incinerated. What a powerful vibration power! The edge of Marquis Sword Star's left arm was badly mutilated, but it was much better than Marquis Sword Snow's. At least, it was not severed, and had only been grazed. In the 30th round, Marquis Swordstar also defeated Young Elephant Lord. The 5th strike of 7-star point kill sword art was a peerless sword art. Even Young Elephant Lord, with his powerful defense, could not resist this strike. It's much more powerful than freezing sword point. I wonder what other trump cards Marquis Sword Snow has? Yi Chen saw all of this and understood that although Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point could compress sword chi to the limit and was extremely frightening, it was still lacking compared to the 5th strike of 7-star point kill sword art which contained the Tao of Death. In the 31st round, Marquis Sword Star persisted and defeated Luo Tianju. Meanwhile, Lan Sanmai also defeated Young Elephant Lord at the cost of heavy injuries. Everyone's guess was right. In the 32nd round, another peak confrontation between sword artists occurred. Marquis Sword Star against Marquis Sword Snow. The two great sword geniuses of Skysword Continent had met. If Marquis Sword Snow lost, he would not be qualified to fight against Yi Chen. If he won, there would still be a trace of hope. Marquis Sword Snow, I've wanted to fight you for a long time. Marquis Sword Star held greedy wolf sword, overflowing with killing intent. Me too. Marquis Sword Snow's expression was as calm as still water. Let's begin. Marquis Sword Star flew toward Marquis Sword Snow. Abandoning the first strike and the second strike, he directly used the third strike. He had some understanding of Marquis Sword Snow. The latter's sword arts were beautiful yet filled with ice-cold killing intent. There was no need to probe. Snowy dance. The sky-filling snowflakes danced in the air, slashing toward Marquis Sword Star. Crackle. The two were evenly matched. Fourth strike. Hundreds of diamond-like starlights flickered. Snowy dance in the sky. This sword strike was the one that broke Dan Tai Mingyue's teleportation art. As the sword slashed out, goose feather-sized snowflakes converged like torrents. The entire chamber was within Marquis Sword Snow's attack range. As long as Dan Tai Mingyu couldn't walk out of the chamber, she would naturally be unable to defeat Marquis Sword Snow. Stars and snowy dance in the sky were still evenly matched. Bring out your fifth strike. Marquis Sword Snow's sword slashed through the goose feather-sized snowflakes, leaving behind a sword scar. At the end of the scar was Marquis Sword Star. Marquis Sword Star's soul power penetrated through the goose feather-sized snowflakes and saw a white energy ball condensed on the sword tip. This white energy ball was condensed with countless sword chi. Once it erupted, it could easily tear apart his defenses and turn him into an ice sculpture, then shatter him into pieces. Peng peng peng. The goose feather-sized snowflakes were blown away. Marquis Sword Star held greedy wolf sword, and man and sword became one. A powerful star force field appeared, allowing him to disregard the vile environment. As he thrust out, the death light produced by the explosion of stars appeared once again. Sword tips rapidly approached each other. Finally, the two collided. Kai 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 kai. The first to explode was Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point. Countless icy chi spread out, covering the surrounding ground with a thick layer of frost. Then, a speck of sword chi erupted, engulfing everything like a storm of sword chi. It was hard to imagine what kind of might this sword would produce if it pierced the body. You've lost. Marquis Sword Star's sword aura was somewhat weaker, but it still pierced through the storm of sword chi and locked onto Marquis Sword Snow's head. Tao of Death. He shouldn't be far from life and death realm. Marquis Sword Snow's face was calm as a thought flashed through his mind. Too powerful. Even Marquis Sword Snow can't block it. Everybody could almost see the scene of Marquis Sword Snow's death. The trump card should be coming out soon, right? Yi Chen's gaze was fixed on Marquis Sword Snow. He could see that the latter's face was very calm. It was not the calmness of knowing that he would lose, but the indifference of taking a leisurely stroll. Kai. A strand of black hair was cut off as Marquis Sword Star's sword inconceivably missed its target. There was a law there, distorting the trajectory of his sword. Sword domain. Bang. The entire life and death palace erupted. Marquis Sword Snow also had a sword domain, the same as Yi Chen's. Chapter 865. Using Sword Domain to distort Marquis Swordstar's killing strike, Marquis Sword Snow raised his right hand, and the snow-white longsword flickered, piercing Marquis Swordstar's throat. Marquis Sword Snow's victory. In the surrounding small chambers, the spectators' hearts were burning with excitement. They truly didn't expect that Marquis Sword Snow still had a trump card. Moreover, this trump card was the same as Yi Chen's Sword Domain. What did Sword Domain represent? Nobody didn't know. It represented that those who possessed Sword Domain had unimaginable potential on the Sword Dao. They were the kings of sword artists, unrivaled in the same realm. Sky Sword Continent is indeed worthy of being the holy land of sword artists. Since the beginning of time, many sword artists with Sword Domain have appeared. And now, it's Marquis Sword Snow's turn. This is also the reason why Marquis Sword Snow's Sword Dao talent is so frightening. Otherwise, why would the number of sword artists on True Spirit Continent be less than 5? Jin Yuan transmissions couldn't be carried out in Life and Death Palace, but soul transmissions could be carried out. Of course, as soon as Marquis Sword Snow's Sword Domain appeared, his position immediately rose to the same level as Yi Chen. Many people even leaned towards him, because apart from Sword Domain, his freezing sword point was also extremely frightening. Combining the two, it seemed like Yi Chen was a bit weaker. Sword Domain. Could he have passed the 7th layer of Sword World? In the small chamber, Marquis Swordstar was tongue-tied. There was a reason why Sky Sword Continent was the holy land of sword artists. There was a mountain-like heavenly sword on the continent. It was said that this sword came from beyond the heavens and was inserted at the center of the continent, gathering the sword chi of the world. Cultivating there, sword artists would have an easier time achieving achievements on the Sword Dao. This was where the name of Sky Sword Continent came from. The heavenly sword was 3,000 meters tall, and contained a bizarre space within it. It was called Sword World by the people of Sky Sword Continent. Nobody knew how many layers the Sword World had. They only knew that flesh and blood couldn't enter. One could only enter in the form of consciousness and then challenge the layers. Marquis Swordstar had entered the Sword World, but he could only pass through the 6th floor at most. He was immediately killed in the 7th floor, because there were too many sword artists there, and each of them had the same aura as him. Even if he could kill 1, or 10, could he kill 100, or 1,000? It was simply impossible. Even some ordinary life and death sword kings would not be able to pass through the 7th floor, because the opponents inside had the same foundation as them. Only their sword arts were different. If he wanted to pass through the 7th level, then he had to grasp the Sword Domain and distort the trajectory of their attacks. Otherwise, he would only be piled to death. There was a benefit to clearing the trials in the Sword Realm, and that was that there was no need to worry about death. Through the tempering of battles, one could gradually hone one's Sword Dao and grasp the essence. The reason why the Sky Sword Continent could produce so many Sword Kings with Sword Domains was because of the existence of the Sword Realm. If I don't possess the Sword Domain, then I'll never be a match for them. Marquis Swordstar tightly clenched his fists, and an intense fighting spirit burst out from his eyes. However, he was not dispirited because of this. On the contrary, the appearance of Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow had filled him with boundless motivation. He even had to thank the two. Without their stimulation, he would not have such a sense of urgency and motivation. Sword Domain, the ultimate honor for sword artists of True Spirit Continent. Lu Xiaoyu let out a deep breath as if he had made up his mind. Two great Sword Dao geniuses had been crowned on Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow. Many people were impatient to see the battle between the two, and they wanted to see the scene of Sword Domain against Sword Domain. Sword Domain, no wonder. Yi Chen suddenly understood. He didn't think that apart from himself, nobody else could possess Sword Domain. Since there were people who had grasped Sword Domain before him, and not just one at that, Marquis Sword Snow's Sword Domain was not something unacceptable. After all, Marquis Sword Snow was the #1 young sword artist of Sky Sword Continent. Anything that happened to him was not strange at all. That's fine. Among the young generation, only I have Sword Domain. I can't even exchange pointers, nor can I verify the mysteries of Sword Domain. An intense battle intent flickered in Yi Chen's eyes. The following battles of the 32nd round paled in comparison. In the 33rd round, the spectators' hearts were raised once again. Xu Jing and Marquis Sword Star had encountered each other. Apart from Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow, the one Marquis Sword Star had the least confidence in was Xu Jing. No, to be honest, he would rather encounter Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow than Xu Jing. After all, if he were to compete with Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow in sword arts, the outcome could be determined. On the other hand, if he were to compete with Xu Jing, it would be a competition of absolute strength. Xu Jing's second step Sacred Dragon Fist had turned young Elephant Lord into a blood mist. Such a frightening destructive power was not the least bit inferior to 7-star point Killsword ART's fifth strike, and even faintly surpassed it. In terms of attack range, the fifth strike, Star Fall, was far inferior to the second step Sacred Dragon Fist. This battle will be dangerous. Marquis Sword Star's expression turned grave as his gaze locked onto Xu Jing. Star-shattering fist. Xu Jing immediately used her ultimate move. The light in the chamber suddenly dimmed, and stars flickered as a shattered star phantom imprinted itself on Marquis Sword Star. Moonlight Chop. Marquis Sword Star was forced to the point where he couldn't even use his 7-star point Killsword art. He hastily raised the Greedy Wolf Sword, and a condensed moonlight shot out, illuminating half of the chamber. Poison Dragon Fist. Dashing forward, Xu Jing punched out again. The fist energy's penetrative power was somewhat similar to Marquis Sword Star's 7-star point Killsword art. However, Xu Jing's Poison Dragon Fist also contained strands of spiraling power. So powerful. Marquis Sword Star could finally understand young Elephant Lord's mood. Xu Jing's fist arts seemed straightforward, but each of them seemed to freeze the space, suppressing the opponent and preventing him from moving quickly. Thus, he could only receive them head-on. If he were to receive Xu Jing head-on, he would be beaten to death. The latter's strength was above young Elephant Lord's, and even more condensed. Fourth strike, Star Storm. His face turning ruthless, Marquis Sword Star directly used the fourth strike, Star Storm. Although Xu Jing's Poison Dragon Fist could penetrate his defense, at least half of the hundreds of sword chi would land on Xu Jing's body. It was a mutually destructive method. Indeed, Marquis Sword Star couldn't care less. He still hadn't fully grasped the fifth strike, and forcibly using it would only lower its power and reveal flaws. Xu Jing's eyes narrowed, and her body came to a sudden stop. She stomped on the chamber's floor and twisted her hands. Golden flames condensed into a huge golden vortex in front of her like a Taiji diagram. Puff 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 puff. The numerous sword chi fell into the golden vortex and were immediately shattered. This is the moment. Marquis Sword Star fought for an opportunity for himself. His body retreated dozens of steps, increasing the distance between them. Then, the fifth strike appeared. Sword Greedy Wolf, which contained the light of exploding stars, suddenly thrust forward. Space seemed to have lost its meaning, and time seemed to have slowed down. Sword Greedy Wolf's tip flickered, and it was less than a meter away from Xu Jing. Roar. Vaguely, a dragon's roar could be heard. Xu Jing's expression was extremely solemn as she faced this fatal strike. She was indeed a golden dragon, but she hadn't been able to transform completely. The person who could transform her into a human was extremely powerful. Before this, no one thought that she was a dragon, because she was a human at that time. Even after soaking in the dragon transformation pool for many years, Xu Jing had only transformed more than half of her body. If not for the opening of Life and Death Secret Realm, Dragon King wouldn't have allowed her to come out. What does she want? Everybody cried out inwardly. In their line of sight, Xu Jing stretched out her left hand, trying to grab Marquis Sword Star's Greedy Wolf. What did she think Marquis Sword Star's fifth strike was? Courting death. Marquis Sword Star sneered. Clang. Xu Jing grabbed the Greedy Wolf sword, grabbing this lightning-fast strike. Her gloved palm rubbed against the sword's body, producing a noise that could instantly kill a person. Squeak. Squeak. Sword Greedy Wolf's thrust was too powerful. Xu Jing's palm trembled, and Greedy Wolf sword thrust forward, only an inch away from Xu Jing's shoulder. As long as it stabbed in, it would instantly extinguish the vitality in Xu Jing's body. The fifth strike, Star Fall, was no joke. Golden flames erupted as Xu Jing pushed her strength to the limit. Her pinkish-white fingernails suddenly sharpened as she tightly held Greedy Wolf's sword, not letting it advance an inch. At the same time, Xu Jing's left hand clenched into a fist and punched out. Sacred Dragon Fist. Puff. The sacred golden dragon brushed past Marquis Swordstar's body, turning him into a blood mist. Even the armor and Greedy Wolf sword on the ground faded away. In the end, Xu Jing defeated Marquis Swordstar in an astonishing manner. Gasp. The sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard. Everyone's mouth was wide open, unable to close. Freak. She grabbed my Greedy Wolf sword with her bare hands and broke Star Fall. In the small chamber, Marquis Swordstar was in a daze for a long time. Star Fall contained an incomparable thrust force. One could easily imagine how frightening the light of death brought about by the explosion of a star was. Although the glove on Xu Jing's hand was a pseudo-supreme grade artifact and didn't make direct contact with Greedy Wolf sword, the power transmitted through was still extremely frightening. It could cripple the arm of anyone under life and death realm. It was simply impossible to receive. If he could receive this move, then Starfall Annihilation wouldn't be called Starfall Annihilation. However, Xu Jing had done it. How much strength and endurance was required to do so? Marquis Sword Snow was also startled, and his gaze turned somewhat sluggish. The Golden Dragon is the Golden Dragon. It's a legendary existence. Yi Chen smiled bitterly. In terms of life form, golden dragons were too much higher. If it were anyone else who had received Star Fall with their bare hands, they would have died miserably. Xu Jing's battle was too astonishing. The following battles left the spectators somewhat dumbfounded. 33rd battle. Everyone regained their wits. On the stele, two names shone. Marquis Sword Snow's name and Yi Chen's name. Two great sword Dao geniuses had finally met. Sword art versus sword art. Sword domain versus sword domain. Who would have the last laugh? This was the question in everyone's heart. At this moment, no one had any distracting thoughts in their minds. The astonishing scene created by Xu Jing had also been eliminated, and their eyes were firmly fixed on the two below. Chapter 866. The two have finally met. Marquis Swordstar tossed aside his gloominess, and his gaze fell on Marquis Sword Snow and Yi Chen. Even without sword domain, the two were only slightly weaker than him, and this was only because of the difference in cultivation base. After all, he was at the peak of the third layer while the two were at the second layer. If the two were at the third layer, he might not necessarily win, and he might even lose against Marquis Sword Snow. Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point was extremely powerful. Once the two used sword domain, the strength of sword artists would increase by tenfold. As long as one wasn't at the life and death realm, one wouldn't even have the strength to contend against the two. Sword domain's restraint on sword artists was simply too great. Sword rule could easily distort the opponent's sword trajectory, and their attacks were even more ferocious. Marquis Sword Snow should have a higher chance of winning. Marquis Sword Star inwardly said. At the center of the chamber, Yi Chen and Marquis Sword Snow stood 100 meters apart. If neither of us had sword domain, you wouldn't be my opponent, unless you have an even more powerful trump card. Marquis Sword Snow indifferently said. Is that so? Yi Chen didn't reply. Indeed, as Marquis Sword Snow had said, apart from sword domain, the strength he had displayed before was indeed a bit weaker than Marquis Sword Snow. The latter's freezing sword point was Marquis Sword Snow's strongest trump card, while he hadn't even used it. Naturally, he was a bit inferior. Yi Chen was confident that he could instantly kill Marquis Sword Snow with bewitching mirror shattering. Marquis Swordstar's fifth strike, Star Falling, was a sure kill move, and his bewitching mirror shattering was also a sure kill move. Moreover, it was even more powerful than Star Falling, so powerful that it could easily kill a peak evil spirit. However, he didn't think of using bewitching mirror shattering. This was his trump card, a trump card to deal with life and death kings. Although he didn't have much assurance at the moment, as long as his cultivation base reached the third layer, Yi Chen was confident that he could contend against ordinary life and death kings with the Sky Scorpio sword. Therefore, he couldn't use it for now. He could not let the life and death realm warriors in the Blood Skyland know something. For example, the Beast King from the Wolf Warrior and the Tiger Warrior would not let this go easily. After all, the life and death secret realm only opened once every 10 years. If they missed this opportunity, their cultivation would be much weaker than the others. Life and death stones could not be found outside. Our sword domains are the same, and the sword laws they contain are about the same as well. If you don't mind, let's fight in our normal state first. Marquis Sword Snow suggested. All right. Yi Chen nodded without hesitation. What's wrong with Yi Chen? Marquis Sword Snow's strength is clear for all to see. Without sword domain, how could he defeat Marquis Sword Snow? Hearing these words, the people of True Spirit Continent were inwardly anxious. No sword domain. The people from the Blood Sky Continent and the Sword Continent shook their heads. None of them believed that Yi Chen could defeat Marquis Sword Snow without sword domain. In terms of sword arts, only Marquis Sword Star could suppress Marquis Sword Snow. Be careful. Marquis Sword Snow took the initiative to attack. Snowflakes danced in the sky, surging toward Yi Chen. These snowflakes were condensed from sword chi, and each of them contained an extremely powerful compression power. Once released, they could easily penetrate protective Jin Yuan. Buzz. The evil vanquishing sword vibrated as Yi Chen brandished it, creating a sword screen around him. Crackle. The snowflakes were blasted away, issuing faint exploding sounds. Although Yi Chen's vibration sword arts were inferior to Lan Sanmei's demonic blade arts, the sword chi contained in these snowflakes was not even 1/10 of freezing sword points. Therefore, it was naturally useless against Yi Chen. As the snowflakes continued to fall, Marquis Sword Snow flew toward Yi Chen. With a wave of his snow-white longsword, snowflake-shaped sword chi filled the air, carrying an ice-cold killing intent amidst the magnificence. Yi Chen's sword arts were not as magnificent as Marquis Sword Snow's. However, Yi Chen's sword speed was even higher. It was fast and accurate, and in his hands, it was displayed to the limit. Clang clang clang. The two fought from the ground to the air, then flew along the walls of the chamber. For a moment, only snowflakes and sword chi could be seen. Waning moon. Stepping on the wall as if it was flat ground, Yi Chen waved his sword, and a black waning moon flickered. Marquis Sword Snow's complexion turned grave. In terms of sword arts, he was actually inferior to Yi Chen. In a battle between the two, they couldn't just use killing moves from the beginning to the end. There would always be ordinary moves. During the confrontation, he slowly sensed that Yi Chen's foundation was extremely powerful. Some inconspicuous details had turned into opportunities for the opponent to launch an attack. His body suddenly spun, and the snow-white long sword revolved around his body. Clang. Relying on revolving sword arts, Marquis Sword Snow blocked Yi Chen's waning moon. However, the tremendous force also pushed him off the wall and onto the floor of the chamber, his footsteps staggering. Kai. What welcomed him was a sky full of cold stars. Yi Chen's figure was hidden behind the cold stars like a viper, waiting for an opportunity to deal a fatal blow. Snow dance in the sky. The snowflakes flourished, and so did Marquis Sword Snow's sword light. Under the guidance of an invisible sword chi, the numerous snowflakes converged like a stream of water. Crack, crack. Sounds of sword chi explosions resounded without end, and the two's figures were faintly discernible amidst the shattered snowflakes. Break. Yi Chen pushed his vibration sword arts to the limit. The evil shattering sword pierced through the shattered snowflakes and slashed at Marquis Sword Snow, leaving behind an extremely fine sword mark. Marquis Sword Snow had to admit that he had been careless. He had actually allowed Yi Chen to seize an opportunity and suppress him until now. Even if he used his large-scale snow dance in the sky, it would be of no use. So frightening. Only now did the crowd realize how powerful Yi Chen was. Marquis Sword Snow, who didn't use freezing sword point, didn't even have the leeway to counterattack, and could only passively defend. Marquis Sword Snow, who didn't use freezing sword point, didn't even have a chance to counterattack. Clang. Sparks flew in all directions, melting a large amount of snowflakes. Marquis Sword Snow slid on the ground, which was covered in frost. His gliding speed was extremely fast, and his whole body left behind after images. Using the frost to increase the distance. Yi Chen's brows twitched, but he didn't pursue. The distance had already been increased, and recklessly charging forward would only put him in a passive situation. From afar, Marquis Sword Snow looked over. You're indeed powerful, but without a powerful sword move, you're doomed to lose. After adjusting his aura, Marquis Sword Snow's voice resounded. Sword moves are used to kill. If they can't hit their target, no matter how powerful they are, it's useless. Yi Chen calmly stood there. In that case, let's see how you're going to take my freezing sword point. Marquis Sword Snow's aura had already been adjusted to its peak. His figure flickered, and like a flickering light, he shot over. His feet didn't touch the ground, as if he was gliding. Freezing sword point is about to come out. I wonder how Yi Chen will block it. He can't, unless he uses his sword domain. Among the crowd, those who were more familiar with each other exchanged soul transmissions, their moods surging. When the distance between the two was less than 10 meters, Marquis Sword Snow took out his sword. As soon as the sword was unleashed, the fluttering snowflakes in the surroundings froze. The snow-white long sword in his hand stabbed out, and a glass-like white energy sphere appeared on its tip, piercing toward Yi Chen. The space was pierced, and the edges froze. Too fast, impossible to dodge. A distance of 10 meters could be directly ignored by top-notch sword artists. No one could dodge in such a short distance. Wouldn't that mean that one's movement speed would surpass the speed of the sword? This was simply impossible. The evil shattering sword vibrated as Yi Chen also thrust out. His sword speed was even faster than Marquis Sword Snow's. Using vibration sword arts to deal with my freezing sword point. Marquis Sword Snow didn't know what Yi Chen intended. Freezing sword point was 30% stronger than Lan Sanmei's annihilation chop, and Yi Chen's vibration sword arts were inferior to Lan Sanmei's second blade move, demonic chop. Clang. At the same time, Yi Chen's left hand grabbed the broken blood sword at his waist and pulled it out, thrusting out as well. It was still the same vibration sword arts. Dual swords. Multitasking. Only Yi Chen could multitask in such an intense battle, and even maintain his peak battle power without the slightest bit of reduction. Dual swords. Chu Zhongtian's eyes lit up. Yi Chen's dual swords had been displayed in the Southern Region Martial Tea Party. He couldn't understand why Yi Chen could display the strongest might of both swords. Peng. Yi Chen's evil shattering sword clashed with Marquis Sword Snow's long sword. The vibrational power and compressed power collided and cancelled each other out, causing a violent explosion in the air. At the same time, the broken blood sword in Yi Chen's left hand had also arrived in front of Marquis Sword Snow's face, only a step away from piercing through his skull. No one had expected the situation to turn out like this. No one could have imagined that Yi Chen would use dual swords to break Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point. Although Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point still had more than half of its power remaining and could pierce through Yi Chen's body, Yi Chen's other sword could also pierce through Marquis Sword Snow's skull. Comparing the two, it was Yi Chen who had the upper hand. After the freezing sword point was weakened by the vibration sword arts, its trajectory slightly deviated. Originally, it was aimed at Yi Chen's throat, but now, it was aimed at Yi Chen's chest. If Yi Chen's defense were a bit stronger, he might have been able to survive. On the other hand, if Marquis Sword Snow's head was pierced by Yi Chen's sword, he would undoubtedly die. Sword domain. Sword domain. The two simultaneously operated their sword domains, and sword laws spread out. Kai. Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point pierced through the air, its trajectory greatly deviating. The storm of sword chi was also affected by the sword laws, and not a single strand of it shot toward Yi Chen. The sword domain could not only affect the trajectory of a sword, but also any attack that was executed in the form of a sword. It was extremely tyrannical. Marquis Sword Snow's sword missed, and so did Yi Chen's sword. The two simultaneously operated their sword domains, affecting each other. Neither could injure the other, and neither could do anything to the other. Chapter 867. Sword domain is truly too powerful. If a sword artist didn't have a sword domain, fighting them would simply be courting death. Only 2 sword artists with sword domains could put up a fight. Everybody held their breaths. For them, such a confrontation between peak sword artists was something they might not even get to see once in their lifetime. After all, in the whole of Elysium, sword artists with sword domains were few and far between. Everybody was paying close attention to this battle, and Marquis Swordstar and Lu Xiaoyu were even more so. Although watching sword domains being used wouldn't allow them to grasp how to create sword domains, knowing a little was better than knowing nothing. Swish. While activating sword domains, the 2 retreated and cautiously looked at each other. With sword domain, killing moves are meaningless. It would only be a waste of Jin Yuan. Marquis Sword Snow furrowed his brows as he pondered on how to defeat Yi Chen. Sword domains can counteract each other, but only by more than half. The remaining half is enough to affect sword trajectories. Just a moment ago, Yi Chen could feel that his sword domain had been somewhat suppressed. Of course, his opponent must have felt the same. Seems like I can only test the limits of sword domain. Yi Chen hadn't fought against a sword artist with sword domain before. Therefore, he wasn't clear about the details of sword domain. This was an opportunity for him to fully understand sword domain. The 2 confronted each other for a moment. Suddenly, the 2 charged forward at the same time. Sword out. Kai 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 kai, a comical yet not funny scene occurred. The 2 were like toddlers who had just learned how to raise their swords. No matter how they stabbed, they couldn't reach each other. No matter how they slashed, they couldn't reach each other. Their speed was very accurate. From top grade, they were reduced to second grade. Intense sword chi randomly circulated in the 2's sword domains and then leaked out. Spiritual sword. The evil shattering sword waved, and hundreds of cold stars shot toward Marquis Sword Snow. Snow dance in the sky. Marquis Sword Snow had also thought of this point. Thus, he used Snow Dance in the sky, which had the widest range. Immediately, sky-filling snowflakes danced and surged toward Yi Chen. Kai. A strand of Yi Chen's long hair was cut off by the ice-cold sword chi, and cold air spread everywhere. A faint trace of blood appeared on Marquis Sword Snow's cheek, and a drop of blood rolled down. I see. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. Sword domain had a limit. Everything had a limit. Without a limit, even a life and death sword king without a sword domain could be killed. As long as one launched a sufficient number of attacks in an instant, the sword domain would be overwhelmed, and a loophole would appear. It was like catching fish. If one caught too many fish, there would always be fish that slipped through the net. Of course, it was mainly because their sword domains weren't strong enough, and they'd only developed a trace of the sword laws. If the sword laws were extremely formidable, then it was still unknown whether it would be effective. Besides that, this was related to their sword domains cancelling each other out. If it was a swordsman without a sword domain, it would be useless even if he launched 10 times more attacks in an instant. Because this was a battle between sword domains. Spiritual sword, double. With the evil shattering sword in his right hand and the blood-ruined sword in his left, Yi Chen used spiritual sword at the same time. Double the number of cold stars shot toward Marquis Sword Snow. Not good. Marquis Sword Snow no longer exchanged blows with Yi Chen, and instead focused on defense. The sky-filling snowflakes converged around him, forming a flawless snowflake barrier that resisted Yi Chen's spiritual sword. Puff, 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 puff. The snowflakes contained compressed sword chi, and as soon as the cold stars struck them, the snowflakes exploded. For a moment, Yi Chen couldn't do anything to Marquis Sword Snow, and the 2 were in a deadlock. Marquis Sword Snow is being suppressed. But Yi Chen can't break through Marquis Sword Snow's defense either. Could it be a draw? Everybody communicated with each other through soul transmissions. Ha! The snowflake barrier exploded, blasting away all of Yi Chen's attacks. After pulling away, Marquis Sword Snow floated in the air and expanded his sword domain, covering the entire chamber. In the next moment, eerie white longswords appeared in the air. At a glance, there were at least several thousand of them. Sword domain attack. As long as one was within the range of the sword domain, one couldn't escape its attack. Very well, Let's see whose sword domain is stronger. Yi Chen also floated in the air, and several thousand azure long swords appeared in front of him. Their tips flickered with a cold light, emitting a dense sword intent. Sword domain confrontation. Everybody's eyes widened. Fine air-piercing sounds rang out as thousands of white longswords and azure longswords shot out at the same time, colliding like two meteor showers. Crack, crack. At every moment, dozens of white longswords and green longswords would disappear, and at every moment, new white longswords and green longswords would be born. The intensity of the battle had already surpassed everybody's imagination. Split. Yi Chen squinted his eyes, and hundreds of azure long swords flew out, arcing toward Marquis Sword Snow from the side. Block for me. Marquis Sword Snow controlled hundreds of white long swords to block. Split again. Yi Chen simultaneously sent out 5 batches of azure long swords, attacking Marquis Sword Snow from 5 different angles. What a powerful soul power! Everybody exclaimed in admiration. Simultaneously controlling 5 batches of azure longswords required an enormous amount of soul power. However, on second thought, Yi Chen could perfectly multitask, so it was not strange at all. Block again. Marquis Sword Snow's expression turned grave and stern. 5 batches of white longswords flew out, clashing with the azure longswords. This Marquis Sword Snow's soul power is not weak either. It should be 2 to 3 times stronger than ordinary people. Normally, people with a high comprehensive ability would have a very powerful soul power, which was even more powerful than normal people. For example, Yi Chen's soul power was 5 times more powerful than normal people's, which meant that his comprehensive ability was very high. Although he had not traveled to this world in the past 14 years, which was why he started later than the others, in terms of profound sense understanding, he had still surpassed the others. Let's see how you block this time. Yi Chen instantly sent out 10 batches of azure long swords, attacking Marquis Sword Snow from 10 different angles. The beautiful arcs and orderly arrangement displayed Yi Chen's control over the long swords. His soul power is so much stronger than mine. Marquis Sword Snow's brows creased, and his soul power suddenly erupted. Soul amplification secret art. In terms of soul power, there were offensive secret arts and defensive secret arts. Naturally, there were amplification secret arts as well. Comparatively speaking, amplification secret arts were much rarer, and their value was several times that of offensive and defensive secret arts. This was because once one's soul was amplified, using offensive and defensive secret arts would be equivalent to raising one's soul power to a whole new level. With the amplification of his soul power, Marquis Sword Snow's control over the white longswords immediately became more skillful. 10 batches of white longswords flew out, intercepting Yi Chen's azure longswords. Freaks. 2 freaks. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air and cursed inwardly. In his line of sight, 10 batches of white longswords and 10 batches of cyan longswords seemed to be fighting each other. In other words, it was equivalent to 2 people each controlling 10 people and using different methods to fight. How terrifying was this control? Oh, a soul amplification secret art. Yi Chen could see that Marquis Sword Snow's soul power had increased to the same level as his. There was no longer any gap between them. Unfortunately, the amplified soul power still exceeds your limit. I'm already used to such a huge soul power, so I don't feel the slightest burden. As this thought flashed in his mind, the 10 batches of azure long swords under Yi Chen's control gradually became more and more exquisite. Stabbing, chopping, and even upward slashing. Although they were only simple moves, they were extremely fast, without the slightest delay. On the other hand, the white longswords on Marquis Sword Snow's side were much more rigid. If Marquis Sword Snow's 10 batches of white longswords were like 10 second-rate sword artists, then Yi Chen's 10 azure longswords were like 10 first-rate sword artists. The difference was a whole level. Ding ding dang dang. The white longswords under Marquis Sword Snow's control were completely routed, and the azure longswords were about to reach him. I can't lose. Marquis Sword Snow's will was firm. He was not afraid of losing, but if he could avoid losing, then he would not lose. Which genius didn't wish to be unrivaled all the way? Sometimes, a single thought could decide one's life. Soul Secret Sword. His gaze pierced through the countless long swords and landed on Yi Chen's body. An incorporeal, colorless, and shadowless soul sword appeared on his forehead and shot toward Yi Chen. Soul attack secret art. Moreover, it was a soul attack secret art executed after soul amplification. The spectators sensed a peculiar soul ripple. How could they not know that Marquis Sword Snow had used a soul attack to defeat Yi Chen? Of course, nobody said anything. Soul attack was still an attack, and it was not some despicable method. On the contrary, in the life and death realm, the soul's function became increasingly important. One could choose not to focus on soul, but one's accomplishments in soul could not be too weak. I want to injure the opponent's soul and defeat him in one move. Marquis Sword Star guessed Marquis Sword Snow's intention. Generally speaking, in a battle of the same level, soul attacks would find it difficult to destroy the soul of a half-step king. This was because half-step kings would have a soul membrane around their soul, and the higher the realm, the stronger the membrane. Apart from that, martial will and sword will both had defensive properties against soul attacks. Therefore, even if the opponent didn't cultivate soul secret arts, it would be impossible to kill the opponent with soul attacks. Soul was only a support. Although it was very important, it could hardly kill the opponent in one move. The speed of the soul attack was extremely fast, surpassing any energy or material attack. It was about to reach Yi Chen's body. Soul light. Yi Chen couldn't allow the soul sword to hit him. After all, this amplified soul sword might even injure his soul. Puff. A silver vertical eye opened on his forehead and shot out a soul beam, colliding with the soul sword. How could the soul sword be the opponent of Yi Chen's innate ability? After all, Marquis Sword Snow's soul had been amplified to the same level as Yi Chen's, and his control was even weaker. As soon as the two collided, the soul sword immediately disintegrated, and the much dimmer soul light charged into Marquis Sword Snow's sea of soul. His face instantly paled, and his control over sword domain disappeared. Puff, puff. A large number of cyan-colored swords shot out and brushed past Marquis Sword Snow's body, turning him into a bloody mist. How come he has a vertical eye? Many people noticed the eye on Yi Chen's forehead, which was very similar to the legends. Chapter 868. The number of flesh and blood life forms with a vertical eye was extremely low, and the number of humans with a vertical eye was as low as 1 in billions and billions. If someone opened a vertical eye, then something must have happened to their body. For example, an extremely powerful innate talent in some aspect had awakened their innate talent. Innate talent was bestowed by the heavens. Innate talent in the aspect of soul? It's the soul eye. Someone cried out. Those who opened the soul eye had an extremely powerful innate talent. But, conversely, those with extremely powerful innate talent might not be able to open the soul eye. This was because the probability of opening the soul eye was extremely small, so small that it was negligible. Nobody could understand the reason behind this. It was rumored that once the soul eye was opened, one's body would contain the power of inheritance, and their descendants would more or less receive a bit of the inheritance, causing their soul power to be extremely powerful. Of course, the difficulty of opening the soul eye for the next generation was extremely high. It could be said that with the soul eye, Yi Chen's descendants would be blessed. Their starting point would be higher than others, and their accomplishments would be easier. What a powerful innate talent! Once he enters life and death realm, his status will be much higher than ordinary life and death kings, and his words will carry even more weight. Everyone present was a genius among geniuses. Their sights were set high, and their ambitions huge. Their ultimate goal was naturally to become a life and death king, becoming an influential figure in Elysium. However, they had heard that life and death realm was merely the beginning. In 1,000 years, one might be able to walk from Chi disciple realm to life and death realm in the first few decades, but in the remaining 900 years, one might not be able to reach the peak of life and death realm. 900 years was a long period of time. One could marry and have children normally, and their descendants would also marry and have children normally. This is the legendary soul eye. In the small chamber, Marquis Sword Snow's face turned grave. The pressure brought by Yi Chen was enormous. Yi Chen was not weaker than him in any aspect, and his soul was even more powerful than his. Let's see who wins and loses in life and death realm. After defeating Marquis Sword Snow, Yi Chen had undoubtedly become the #1 young sword artist of Elysium. His next target was Life and Death Realm. His opponents would also be Life and Death Kings and Demonic Beast Kings. Age no longer held any meaning, because his opponents would be old monsters that were hundreds or even thousands of years old. The 33rd round had ended. The 34th round, which was also the second to last round, began. In this round, Xu Jing and Marquis Sword Snow were unavoidable. Between the two, it was hard to say who was stronger. Marquis Sword Snow had Sword Domain, which could suppress the opponent. However, it also depended on the opponent. Xu Jing could even receive Marquis Sword Star's 5th strike, Star Meteor, empty-handed, so it was still unknown how effective Sword Domain would be against her. On the other hand, Xu Jing's Sacred Dragon Fist was unparalleled. If Marquis Sword Snow was hit, he would die for sure. On the stage, Marquis Sword Snow was concentrating his attention on Xu Jing. He could disregard anyone, even Yi Chen. At that time, he was confident in his victory. However, against Xu Jing, he had no confidence at all. He couldn't deceive even himself. Dancing Snow. Marquis Sword Snow first probed with a snowy dance. Suddenly, snow filled the sky and enveloped Xu Jing. With a flick of his hands, a huge golden whirlpool appeared in front of Xu Jing, devouring the incoming snowflakes and shattering them into pieces. Star-shattering fist. After dispersing the golden whirlpool, Xu Jing took a step forward, and an aura that dimmed even the light rushed toward Marquis Sword Snow. At the same time, a star phantom flickered, and a star fragment imprinted itself on Marquis Sword Snow's location. Sword Domain. A huge sword pressure burst out of Marquis Sword Snow's body, and even the space seemed to condense, becoming firmer than usual. As soon as Xu Jing's fist energy entered the range of the Sword Domain, it immediately caused spatial wrinkles to appear. It was like a fish swimming on the water surface, causing changes in the water flow and creating a resistance. Borrowing the pressure of the Sword Domain, Marquis Sword Snow raised his snow-white longsword and stabbed out 3 times in a row. Rumble. Chi exploded, and a huge airflow spread out. Freezing Sword Point. With the Sword Domain, Marquis Sword Snow ignored the shockwaves and shot toward Xu Jing. Midway, the snow-white long sword in his hand suddenly stabbed out like a viper's tongue, moving at an inconceivably fast speed. After the probing, it was time for the killing move. Don't tell me she's going to catch it with her hands. Someone couldn't help but ask. Yi Chen didn't know what the others were thinking, but he was sure that Xu Jing wouldn't catch Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point empty-handed. The freezing sword point contained an intense freezing chi. Once it erupted, it would be enough to freeze her. Although it couldn't truly freeze her, as long as her body stiffened for a split second, it would give Marquis Sword Snow an opportunity. Just as expected, Xu Jing didn't catch it empty-handed. She stomped her foot on the ground, creating a half-foot deep pit. It should be known that the Life and Death Palace's secret chambers were extremely hard. Everyone's attacks could only leave some marks on the chamber's surface. However, a single stomp from Xu Jing had created a huge pit. One could imagine how much strength she had used. Stomping her foot on the ground, Xu Jing's entire body shot back. The shockwaves also assisted Xu Jing, increasing her speed. As she retreated, a golden light appeared on Xu Jing's fist. Second step Sacred Dragon Fist. As she punched out, a dragon roar resounded, and an incomparably sacred golden dragon spiraled out. Kai Kai. Bang. The freezing sword point collided with the golden dragon, and a frightening sword chi storm swept out. The intense freezing chi directly froze the ground, creating a meter-thick layer of ice. However, no matter how powerful the sword chi storm was, it couldn't stop the golden dragon's advance. Shua. The golden dragon pierced through the sword chi storm and pounced on Marquis Sword Snow. Puff. Marquis Sword Snow instantly turned into a blood mist, and his armor and snow-white longsword were teleported into the small chamber. Xu Jing's victory. Too frightening. Everybody was astonished by Xu Jing's strength. Even someone as powerful as Marquis Sword Snow couldn't block her killing move. Who else could? Junior brother Yi's girlfriend is extraordinary. As one of the 100 beasts, Yang Fengfeng's potential was astonishing. However, her strength couldn't compare to the peak geniuses of True Spirit Continent. Although her realm was somewhat low, and she might be stronger than young Elephant Lord if she could reach the peak of the 3rd layer, she still couldn't compare to Marquis Sword Snow and Yi Chen. On the other hand, Xu Jing was also at the 2nd layer, and yet she had such a battle strength. How could an ordinary beast's bloodline have such a frightening battle strength? Only the battle between Yi Chen and Xu Jing is left. It was unknown who said this with soul force. They're lovers, so why would they care about this? They're probably just letting each other win, someone else said. The 35th round, the last round of the battle, as expected, Yi Chen and Xu Jing bumped into each other. Yi Chen stroked his chin, "I can't beat you." What he said was the truth, but also not the truth at the same time. Bewitching mirror shattering or the sacred dragon fist, it was hard to say which one would be more powerful. The biggest possibility was that the two would die together. If it were someone else, he would not mind giving it a try. But, since it was Xu Jing, there was no need for it. 3 or 2 life and death stones meant the same thing to him, since it would only allow him to reach the 3rd level of the life and death challenge. On the other hand, Xu Jing's burden was much greater than his. Dragon King only had a few years left to live. Once he died, the entire Dragon God Celestial Palace would have to rely on Xu Jing to support it. One could well imagine the pressure. Come back as soon as possible. Return to True Spirit Continent. Xu Jing didn't attach much importance to the 1st rank of life and death substitute list compared to Yi Chen. Bang! She raised her palm and shattered her heart meridian, then her body faded. When she reappeared, she was already inside the small chamber. Xu Jing's actions greatly shocked Yi Chen. After a long while, he let out a deep breath and looked at Xu Jing's chamber with an incomparably deep gaze. "Wait for me, I will return. Moreover, I will return as a life and death king." Seeing this scene, many people were jealous of Yi Chen. How could they not have met such a good woman? So touching. Ji Hairuo knew some information about Yi Chen. Yi Chen had left True Spirit Continent because he had no other choice. Xu Jing clearly knew about Yi Chen's situation as well. Therefore, she straightforwardly gave up the 1st rank in order to let Yi Chen obtain 1 more life and death stone. Although 1 life and death stone couldn't allow Yi Chen to reach the peak of the 3rd layer, it could save him a lot of time. Buzz. As the last round of points battle ended, the names on the stele changed. 1st rank, Yi Chen. 2nd rank, Xu Jing. 3rd rank, Marquis Sword Snow. 4th rank, Marquis Sword Star. 5th rank, Lan Sanmai. As for the others, 6th was Young Elephant Lord, 7th Luo Tianju, 8th Undying Demon Lord, 9th Dantai Mingyu, 12th Dugu Ju, 13th Chu Zhongtian, and 17th Yang Fengfeng. Although Dantai Mingyu had spatial teleportation, it depended on the opponent. She lost to Xu Jing because Xu Jing was more powerful than Young Elephant Lord, and her strength could distort the trajectory of space. She lost to Marquis Swordstar because he was only a step away from life and death realm. In her battle with Lan Sanmai, she almost won. However, in the end, she was grazed by Lan Sanmai's Annihilation Chop. The Annihilation Chop contained a frightening vibration power, which could be transmitted through space. Therefore, it naturally defeated Dantai Mingyu. Luo Tianju relied on 9 Dragons' body-protecting body to grind Dantai Mingyu to death. Young Undying Demon Lord relied on his undying body as well as Chaotic World Demonic Palm's wide-range sealing technique. Therefore, Dantai Mingyu could only rank 9th, but she could threaten the majority of people. The Steely's ranking was confirmed and no longer flickered. The top 10 also received their respective rewards. Life and death stones appeared in front of them and fused into their bodies. The 1st rank, Yi Chen, received 3 stones, Xu Jing and Marquis Sword Snow received 2 each, and the 4th to 10th ranks received 1 stone each. Chapter 869. 3 life and death stones merged with his body on their own. Adding the 2 from before, He now had 5 life and death stones inside his body. 4 of them could help him reach the 3rd level of the life and death challenge, and the last one would help him improve his mental state, which would make it easier for him to reach the peak level of the 3rd level. Once he reached the peak of the 3rd layer, he would only be a step away from the life and death realm. There are still 20 days left before the realm closes. I should be able to reach the 3rd layer by then. During this time, I can also comprehend the water profounds. Inside the life and death palace was a strange garden. Every flower, every grass, every mountain, and every river was extremely mysterious. Not only did they contain the cycle of life and death, but they also contained the essence of all sorts of profounds. In a moment, they would all be transported into this garden until the realm closes. Just as Yi Chen was deep in thought, the stone tablet suddenly shone brightly, breaking through the life and death palace and arriving above the whole life and death secret realm. It then enlarged thousands of times until it looked like a mountain. Even the young experts in the outer region of life and death secret realm could see the shining words on the stone tablet. What? Yi Chen is number 1? Who is Yi Chen? Marquis Swordstar was actually pushed down from 1st place to 4th place. What happened? Young Elephant Xiaoluo's ranking also dropped. He can't even enter the top 5. The young experts in the inner region and outer region were stupefied, astonished by this ranking. There were actually 5 newcomers in the top 10, and 4 of them were in the top 5. How could they not be astonished? Each and every one of them was shocked to the point of going crazy. Yi Chen. Haha, it's Yi Chen, from our True Spirit continent. When Yi Chen left True Spirit continent, I thought he would disappear forever. Who would have thought that he would be even more frightening than when he was on True Spirit continent, becoming the first in the life and death substitute list. The young experts of True Spirit continent were exceptionally excited, not because they had a good impression of Yi Chen, but because of admiration for a peerless genius. Moreover, Yi Chen came from True Spirit continent. Dozens of years ago, True Spirit continent had produced Xianhu, and now, Yi Chen had appeared. This kind of pride was hard to understand. The people in the Hall of Life and Death had no idea what was going on outside. Even if they knew, they would not care. Buzz. Everyone was transported from the small chamber to the large chamber and gathered together. Then, the wall in front of the large chamber suddenly opened, and a strong but not dazzling light shone in. What was exposed to the crowd was a garden of unknown size. What they saw was only the tip of the iceberg. It's the garden of the Hall of Life and Death. The Life and Death Palace's garden had gathered the essence of the entire life and death secret realm. Inside, one could directly feel the cycle of life and death, as well as the circulation of profound. At this moment, even the calm and unperturbed Marquis Sword Snow's eyes shone. The eyes of the white-haired and grim-faced Dugu Ju turned fiery. There was no communication, no talking. Everyone walked into the garden together. Senior sister Xu Jing, let's go as well. Yi Chen held Xu Jing's soft hand. En. Xu Jing faintly nodded. As soon as they entered the garden, the passage behind them suddenly closed. What a miraculous place. These flowers wither and die with a single touch, and then grow back again. Xu Jing's palm touched the flower next to her. Unexpectedly, this delicate and beautiful flower withered and died as soon as it came into contact with it. After a few blinks of an eye, it returned to its original state. Life and death reincarnation, in addition to wood profound. Yi Chen sighed. Entering the life and death secret realm was a once-in-a-decade opportunity. Therefore, the two did not waste their time on romance. After a few moments, they parted ways. With a faint fragrance lingering in his hand, Yi Chen sucked in a deep breath, feeling quite satisfied. Parting now is only for meeting in the future. Increasing my strength is more important. Dispelling all distracting thoughts, Yi Chen carefully observed every flower and grass in the garden. After walking for a while, Yi Chen saw a lot of people comprehending. Some were comprehending a rock, some were comprehending trees and flowers, and some had entered an underground cave. The temperature of the cave was very high, and it was obviously magma below. My metal profound has already reached 90% completion. It will be very difficult for me to raise it further. My thunder profound has reached 70% completion, which is not easy to raise either. My wood profound and water profound have reached 60% completion, my fast profound has reached 50% completion, and my slow profound is close to 30% completion. My space profound is 40% completion, and my shadow profound is 30% completion. Fast profound, slow profound, space profound, and shadow profound are all Taishu. I'm afraid I won't be able to make much progress in 20 days. In any case, I already have the space profound as a foundation, so I'm not in a hurry. As for the remaining wood and water profound, it's more practical to comprehend the water profound. Waning Moon contained 90% completion of metal profound and 60% completion of water profound, which was very unbalanced. If the two were equal, its might would increase by several folds, and it would definitely surpass the current bewitching mirror shattering. Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point contained 80% completion of ice profound and water profound, which was why it was so powerful. However, Yi Chen also discovered that his opponent had not fused the two profounds one step further. It was only a preliminary fusion. If the fusion was successful, its might would continue to increase, reaching a frightening level. I don't expect to comprehend the water profound to 90% completion. As long as I can increase it by 10%, I'll be satisfied. Yi Chen was not someone who would bite off more than he could chew. 20 days was too short of time. After making up his mind, Yi Chen began to search for a place with water. After a while, Yi Chen stopped in front of a huge lake. On the lake, there were already a lot of people. They were all quietly comprehending, and no one was disturbing the others. The lake was very big, and Yi Chen chose an empty spot. As soon as he stepped on the lake immediately underwent a drastic change. Ripples quickly spread out and then retracted, repeating without any pause. Soon, 4 days had passed. Death Dao. This is the Death Dao. On a barren mountain, Duguju's body was emitting a dense death aura. Coupled with his snow-white hair, he looked exceptionally frightening. The change attracted a lot of people's attention, and dozens of soul power swept over. It's him. Duguju was quite famous among the 36 schools. His blade arts, which were powered by despair blade intent, had left a deep impression on many people. His ranking was also not low, being the 12th on the life and death substitute list. The death aura is suppressing the life aura? Yi Chen was also paying attention to this area, and his face was filled with astonishment. After entering the life and death chamber, everyone would have a life and death aura. Life and death aura was naturally the aura of life and the aura of death. At this moment, Duguju's death aura was suppressing the life aura. This meant that he had gained some comprehension on the Death Dao, and was close to Marquis Sword Stars. Swish! Duguju brandished his long blade, and the deathly white blade light became increasingly profound. As soon as his soul power came in contact with the blade light, he immediately felt an intense crisis of death. Didn't expect him to be comprehending the Death Dao. After thinking for a moment, Yi Chen could understand why Duguju made such a choice. Despair blade intent was originally very close to death. Compared to others, Duguju could comprehend the Death Dao much more easily. This was his advantage. Currently, Duguju, apart from the top 5, which is somewhat dangerous, the 6th to 10th places are all possible. To have made such a huge leap in strength as soon as he entered, Duguju was probably the first. Calming his heart, Yi Chen eliminated all distracting thoughts and continued comprehending the water profound. 3 days later, the ripples under Yi Chen's feet sped up several times, attracting the attention of others on the lake. His water profound has advanced so fast. Worthy of being the first on the life and death substitute list. These people's eyes were fervent as they continued comprehending the water profound. 70%. Much faster than I thought. Seems like it's because of the life and death cycle contained in the garden. The profound and the life and death cycle were intertwined together, making it much easier to comprehend. Of course, this was also related to Yi Chen's soul power, which was 5 times higher than ordinary people's. In that case, I should aim higher and try to reach 80% completion in the water profound. Not staying here any longer, Yi Chen left the lake. He was already familiar with this place, and there were other places with water in the garden. Wind profound. So that's how it is. On a high ground, Lan Sanmai unceasingly brandished his blade. His blade arts contained vibration power and dark profound, as well as a kind of wind profound. The wind profound and vibration power matched each other perfectly. Each of Lan Sanmai's blade strikes carried an intense tearing sensation. So frightening. The people nearby all retreated, staying far away from them. Although Lan Sanmai had restrained her power and only swung her blade at a close distance without releasing any blade energy, the vibrational power of her blade art, which contained the profound of wind, was even stronger. It could travel through space and reach very far. The surrounding flowers and trees were all shattered, although they quickly grew back. This Lan Sanmai might be even stronger than Marquis Sword Star. He might even be a match for Marquis Sword Snow Yi Chen. Someone discussed. The waterfall rumbled down, falling on Yi Chen's body. Yi Chen closed his eyes. The previous lake was still water, while the current waterfall was flowing water. One was still while the other was moving. The embodiment of the water profound was also different. 2 days passed. Yi Chen opened his eyes and suddenly brandished his sword. Rip! The evil vanquishing sword pierced through the waterfall. Not good. Yi Chen closed his eyes once again. The garden was all-encompassing. In another corner was a lake, but it was covered in ice. Ice and water mixed together, forming a clear distinction at first glance. But from a closer look, they were indistinguishable. This was because ice would turn into water at any moment, and water would turn into ice at any moment. Such a thing could only happen in the Garden of Life and Death Palace. Ice and water fusion. On the ice block, Marquis Sword Snow pulled out his snow-white longsword and stabbed out. This sword was freezing sword point, but its power was even more restrained, not leaking out in the slightest. This signified that his freezing sword point had fused ice profound and water profound to a higher degree. Chapter 870. About twice the power. Marquis Sword Snow spat out a shocking sentence. In this life and death secret realm ranking battle, a lot of trump cards had been revealed. If Xu Jing's Sacred Dragon Fist was the first, then Marquis Sword Star's fifth strike, Star Meteor, would be the second, and the third would be Marquis Sword Snow's Freezing Sword Point. In terms of might, Freezing Sword Point was indeed a lot weaker than Star Meteor, but it was not to the extent of being 2 times weaker. Now, Freezing Sword Point's might had already surpassed Marquis Sword Star's Star Meteor. Most importantly, Freezing Sword Point contained a compressed power. Once it pierced into the opponent's body, it would produce an incomparable frost chi and sword chi storm. At this moment, Marquis Sword Snow had the strength to kill a peak-level evil spirit. There's still time. Let's strive for the next step. Marquis Sword Snow did not plan to comprehend profounds in the garden. He had only mastered 2 profounds, water profound and ice profound, both of which had reached 80% completion. Raising them to 90% would be extremely difficult. Rather than wasting time, he might as well spend it on fused profounds. On the third last day, under the waterfall, Yin, a long sword suffused with a faint golden radiance suddenly slashed out. The sword light was incomparably sharp, yet incomparably supple. The 2 completely different auras fused together, causing the sword to cut through the waterfall and space. Not a single trace of power leaked out, all of it contained within the sword. This sword was extremely hard and powerful, extremely supple and supple. Metal gave birth to water, and water contained metal. Water profound has also reached 80% completion. Yi Chen walked out of the waterfall and circulated his Zhen Yuan, immediately evaporating the water on his body. In the first 7 days, Yi Chen had raised his water profound to 70% completion, and in the next 10 days, it had reached 80% completion. In the remaining 2 days, it would be impossible for his water profound to make any progress. It was simply too unrealistic. Standing beside the waterfall, Yi Chen recalled the charm of that sword strike. That sword attack just now wasn't the waning moon. The waning moon was still a bit rough. No matter how much the metal profound and water profound improved, their power was still limited. It was just like a normal low-grade profound martial skill, which could only contain a limited number of profounds. When one's profound realm was very high, one should create a middle-grade profound martial skill, and then a high-grade profound martial skill. Therefore, the higher the realm of the profound, the more powerful moves were needed to contain it. The might of high-grade profound martial arts varied. A high-grade profound martial art might have a killing power that was 10 or 20 times greater than a low-grade profound martial art. Therefore, high-level profound martial arts were also divided into many levels. The lowest grade profound sense martial arts were ordinary profound sense martial arts, followed by low-grade profound sense martial arts, middle-grade profound sense martial arts, upper-grade profound sense martial arts, and perfect-grade profound sense martial arts. In terms of rank, Waning Moon was only a low-rank profound sense martial art, but that sword just now was almost a mid-rank profound sense martial art. The difference between the two was one small level. Although it was only one small level, the difference in power was at least several times. In the past, Yi Chen thought that Waning Moon had the potential to become a top profound sense martial art as long as his metal profound and water profound reached great completion. But now, it seemed impossible. The higher one's realm was, the more different one's perspective would be. Back then, he thought it was possible, but it was only at that time, and Waning Moon was created by him at that time. How could the sword move created at that time compare to the current one? Metal ultimacy 90% completion and water ultimacy 80% completion. I'm still far from completion, not to mention completion. This sword might still be outdated when the time comes. Therefore, I should be able to create more powerful sword moves based on the improvement of metal and water ultimacy. Why don't I think of a general name for this sword art first? The same series of sword moves could be summarized into a set of sword arts. Let's call it Autumn Water Sword Spell. Waning Moon is the first movement of the Autumn Water Sword Spell, and this sword is the second movement. Then, there will be the third, fourth, and fifth movement, all the way until the metal profound and water profound reach perfection. Autumn Water was the godly jade bone, which was quite poetic. Now that he had thought of the name of the sword art, it was time to name it. Thinking of the extremely condensed sword power when performing this sword attack, the sword light was extremely hard, extremely soft, and extremely tenacious. A phrase appeared in Yi Chen's mind, congealing water. Water, extremely soft. Congealing water meant that water was extremely condensed and could cut through iron and steel. Congealing water, the second movement of the Autumn Water Sword spell. Congealing water has been completed, but the metal profound and water profound still need to be further integrated. The higher the integration, the more condensed the sword power will be, and it will be able to easily cut through even more powerful objects. Getting rid of the distracting thoughts, Yi Chen continued to train the congealing water sword attack. Unknowingly, it was already the last day before the life and death secret realm closed. Right then, a lot of people had already stopped their training and started to spar with each other. At the center of the garden was a huge open space, where everyone had gathered. Dugu Ju is here. Not far away, a white-haired youngster walked over. It was indeed Dugu Ju. Do you dare to fight with me? Dugu Ju said to young Undying Demon Lord. Courting death. Young Undying Demon Lord sneered and walked out from the crowd. After 20 days of training, young Undying Demon Lord had also made some gains. His water profound had improved from 60% completion to 70%. Although his dark profound didn't improve, it had already increased his strength by a lot. Young Undying Demon Lord is ranked 8th, while Dugu Ju is ranked 12th. Although Dugu Ju has improved a lot, young Undying Demon Lord has also improved a bit. This battle is going to be difficult, the spectators discussed in a low voice. Take the blade. Dugu Ju took out his blade, using his most powerful attack right from the get-go. The deathly white blade light contained the Tao of Death. This blade attack seemed to be able to destroy all living beings. Moreover, compared to before, this blade attack was even faster and fiercer. All of Dugu Ju's negative emotions seemed to have been infused into it. Impossible. So powerful. Young Undying Demon Lord's scalp went numb, and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle. With a roar, he suddenly punched out. It was precisely his famous chaotic demon fist. Whoosh! The blade light brushed past the fist energy, which immediately dispersed. Like a hot knife through butter, Duguju's blade fiercely slashed down on young Undying Demon Lord's shoulder. Poochie! A huge amount of blood spurted out from young Undying Demon Lord's shoulder like a fountain. His whole body swayed and staggered. Die! Duguju's body turned and his long blade slashed across young Undying Demon Lord's neck. Poochie! A head flew up, its eyes wide open. In the next moment, young Undying Demon Lord's body was teleported out of the secret realm and revived outside. Gasp! The sound of people sucking in cold breaths resounded as everyone looked at Duguju with dumbfounded expressions. In 20 days, Duguju's improvement was so huge. The first blade strike had rendered young Undying Demon Lord powerless, and the second blade had sent his head flying. Frightening. Not only are there many geniuses in True Spirit Continent, each and every one of them is also frightening. What a good killing blade strike! On the small bridge, Lan Sanmai clapped her hands. Let's fight. Duguju's battle intent boiled. Lan Sanmai shook her head. You're still not my opponent, even if you've comprehended Death Dao. It's not up to you. Duguju pounced over, and the deathly blade light appeared once again. I said, you're still not my opponent. As a demonic cultivator, how could Lan Sanmai be afraid? Since Duguju wanted to fight her, she didn't mind sending him on his way out of the secret realm. Demon Chop. The black blade light turned indistinct, containing a vibration power that far surpassed the past. Clang. Duguju's body was blasted away. Lan Sanmai chased after him, brushing past his opponent. Puff. A large amount of blood spurted out, and a blade scar appeared on Duguju's forehead, extending all the way to his throat. Duguju lost. Sheathing his blade, Lan Sanmai's face was calm. Hee, the peerless geniuses of my Blood Sky continent are not inferior to those of True Spirit Continent. Duguju is so powerful, killing young Undying Demon Lord with 2 blade strikes, but still lost to Lan Sanmai. The young experts of Blood Sky Continent felt a sense of pride. Look, Marquis Swordstar and Marquis Sword Snow have arrived. At this time, it was Sky Sword Continent's turn to speak. Marquis Swordstar came from the east, while Marquis Sword Snow came from the west. What astonished the crowd was that the two's gazes passed through the crowd and landed on each other, brimming with battle intent. What's going on? Marquis Swordstar and Marquis Sword Snow want to fight? Sky Sword Continent's people creased their brows. Marquis Swordstar, I'll fight you without sword domain. Marquis Sword Snow's voice was indifferent, but his battle intent was even more intense. Then you'll die for sure. Marquis Swordstar sneered. Take out your sword. Your 7-star point kill sword ART's 5th strike, Star Fall. Among sword artists, Marquis Swordstar's Star Fall was the strongest. Therefore, Marquis Sword Snow wanted to use his freezing sword to kill his opponent. Alright, I'll fulfill your wish. Marquis Swordstar didn't waste any words. Pulling out Greedy Wolf, he pierced through the air. This sword strike was just as frightening as before, containing the death radiance of exploding stars. Some observant people discovered that Marquis Swordstar's understanding of Death Dao had deepened, because this sword strike was even more refined than before. Marquis Sword Snow's complexion didn't change. He instantly pulled out his snow-white long sword and welcomed the incoming strike. The sword chi didn't disperse in the slightest, but instead condensed at the tip of the sword, forming a glass-like white energy sphere. Rumble. A large amount of freezing chi spread out, freezing the ground and forcing everyone to retreat. Your freezing sword points might has doubled. Half of Marquis Swordstar's body was frozen, and cracks could be seen on its surface. Your Star Fall isn't weak either. Marquis Sword Snow looked down at his abdomen, where a bloody hole had been pierced. The vitality within his body was directly extinguished. Catcher. Half of Marquis Swordstar's body shattered, sending him out of the secret realm along with his armor and Greedy Wolf. Although Marquis Sword Snow's aura was much weaker, he wasn't dead yet. This battle was a bitter victory for Marquis Sword Snow. Ha ha, My Earth Profound has finally reached 70% completion. Who dares to fight me? Rumble. The earth trembled as a tall figure walked over. It was young Elephant Lord. Young Master Seong was in high spirits. His main path of development was to cultivate energy. Other than studying Power Profound, he had also comprehended the Earth Profound. The improvement of the Earth Profound made him very confident. One had to know that he was a demonic beast. His comprehension wasn't very high, but his body was very strong. Therefore, even if he made a small improvement in the Profound, his strength would increase explosively. From afar, young Elephant Lord saw Yi Chen walking toward him. He pointed at him and said, "Yi Chen, do you dare to fight?" Sword domain had a huge influence on sword artists, but on other experts, it could only suppress them. As a body refining expert, he was the least affected by sword domain. Chapter 871. Why wouldn't a loser dare? 2 days had deepened Yi Chen's understanding of congealing water. The charm of metal giving birth to water had also been penetrated by him, harmonizing and fusing them together. Seeing that there wasn't much time left, Yi Chen left the waterfall and walked over. He didn't expect young Elephant Lord to use him to establish his might after making some progress. Naturally, he wouldn't give the other party too much face. That was then, and this is now. Release your sword domain. Young Elephant Lord was very unhappy that he was ranked 6th. What made him even more unhappy was that Yi Chen was ranked 1st. To him, it didn't matter if Yi Chen had a sword domain or not. He wasn't like the young Undying Demon Lord, who could be suppressed by the sword domain. I don't need sword domain to deal with you. Yi Chen naturally knew that sword domain couldn't suppress body refinement experts like Shu Jing and young Elephant Lord. Of course, it would make things easier for him. His not using sword domain. Everyone was shocked. In the ranking battles, Yi Chen had relied on sword domain to defeat young Elephant Lord. He had used it to slightly suppress young Elephant Lord before piercing his eye. In their opinion, young Elephant Lord was more or less afraid of Yi Chen's sword domain even though he said he didn't care about it. But now that Yi Chen had said that he wouldn't use sword domain, he naturally couldn't go back on his words. In that case, what could he rely on to defeat young Elephant Lord? He had improved, and young Elephant Lord had also improved. Hearing that Yi Chen wouldn't use sword domain, young Elephant Lord was a little surprised, but then he was pleasantly surprised. Yi Chen had relied on sword domain to defeat him, so he thought that Yi Chen wouldn't give up on his advantage. Since that was the case, he might as well be magnanimous and take the initiative to let Yi Chen release his sword domain. But he didn't expect that Yi Chen would actually give up on his sword domain. Shameless boasting. Take my fist. His body expanding to 3 meters, young Elephant Lord strode toward Yi Chen like a shooting star. Midway, he raised his bowl-sized fist and punched out fiercely. An extremely dense savage chi pervaded the air, and the image of 100 elephants trumpeting together could be faintly seen. 8 wild elephants' fists. Clearly, young Mammoth Lord's earth profundity had improved, and the 8 Desolation Mammoth Fist's power had increased by quite a bit. Yi Chen, let me see your ace. Marquis Sword Snow, on the other hand, did not feel that Yi Chen was deliberately mystifying things. Being able to reach the first place, he was definitely not a fool. Roar. Facing the young Elephant Lord's fierce elephant fist, Yi Chen unsheathed his sword. Although it seemed slow, it was actually fast. The evil vanquishing sword was suffused with a faint golden radiance. So fast. This was everyone's first impression. His second impression was that it was so domineering and so flexible. Yi Chen's water condensation sword technique contained both the toughness of metal and the softness of water. Compared to Waning Moon, it was more than twice as exquisite. Kai. The sound of sparks burning through cotton rang out. The evil vanquishing sword directly pierced through young Elephant Lord's fist energy and landed a heavy blow on his fist. Crackle. The extremely condensed sword energy passed through young Elephant Lord's glove and reached his right arm. His right arm emitted popping sounds as it exploded into a bloody mist. Poochie. The second sword strike, Yi Chen pierced through young Elephant Lord's throat. Eyes wide open, young Elephant Lord was teleported out of the secret realm. It seems even more powerful than Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point. Could this be the result of his 20 days of hard work? If Dugu Ju and Lan Sanmei's improvements were already astonishing, and Marquis Sword Snow's was frightening, then Yi Chen's improvement could only be described as terrifying. It should be known that Yi Chen's sword moves were far inferior to Marquis Sword Snow's freezing sword point during the ranking battles. But now, they were several times more powerful. What is this move called? Marquis Sword Snow solemnly asked. Water condensation. Yi Chen replied. Good move, water condensation. Marquis Sword Snow could see that Yi Chen's move also contained the power of compression. However, the difference was that Yi Chen's power was transmitted outwards, while his freezing sword point was an eruption. Using the same power but releasing it in different ways created two completely different moves. Apart from the few people who had just fought, the others had not made much progress. Therefore, they were only exchanging pointers, rarely spilling blood. In the last half a day, Xu Jing also came out. Half a day was too short, and the two did not feel the passage of time. Finally, signs of the realm closing appeared, and everyone was teleported out. Come back soon. Xu Jing's figure rapidly faded. I will. Yi Chen's figure also faded. Buzz. The space distorted, and everyone left the realm. Blood Sky Continent, in the sky above the desolate mountain range, the space constantly squirmed, and one figure after another appeared. Yi Chen. Lan Sanmei walked toward Yi Chen. What's the matter? Yi Chen asked. Lan Sanmei said, You're not from Blood Sky Continent. Now that you've killed young Tiger Lord, the Beast King of his sect will most likely not let this matter go. Therefore, you'd better leave Blood Sky Continent as soon as possible. The longer you stay, the more danger you'll face. Although Life and Death Beast Kings won't kill you openly, they'll still give you an unbearable punishment. The news of Yi Chen killing young Tiger Lord reached Lan Sanmei's ears through the mouths of others. Yi Chen shook his head. True Spirit Continent is millions of li away from Blood Sky Continent. It's too late to escape now, and I don't intend to escape anyway. Lan Sanmei turned silent, then said, How will I know if I don't try? Beast Kings can travel through the void, and can travel millions of li in an instant. If I escape, they'll most likely decide to deal with me. I might as well stay in Blood Sky Continent and watch. Apart from this reason, Yi Chen also wanted to protect Eternal Sky Sect. He couldn't just leave and let Eternal Sky Sect suffer the consequences. Who knew what kind of humiliation Eternal Sky Sect would suffer in the future? Seeing Yi Chen's resolute expression, Lan Sanmei knew that persuasion would be useless. In Yi Chen's eyes, she even saw an extremely vague battle intent. She didn't know if it was just her imagination. In that case, I'll tell you about the Beast Kings of Sky Tiger Sect. Sky Tiger Sect has two great Beast Kings. One is Sky Tiger King, the sect leader of Sky Tiger Sect, and the other is Blood Tiger King, the supreme elder of Sky Tiger Sect. Sky Tiger King became a Beast King 300 years ago. In the starry sky, he once killed 3 king-grade space beasts by himself, and even ripped off a corner of a small star. His battle strength is not something ordinary Life and Death Kings can compare to. What Lan Sanmei said was told to her by her sect elders. Killed 3 king-grade space beast. Yi Chen's eyes narrowed. On land, there were demonic beasts, and in the starry sky, there were space beasts. These space beasts couldn't pass through the 3 layers of restrictions and arrive at Elysium. However, their battle strength was frightening. One-on-one, ordinary Life and Death Kings couldn't do anything to a king-grade space beast. Some powerful king-grade space beasts could even compare to titled monarchs. Sky Tiger King. I'm not his opponent. Don't tell me Yuan Emperor has to make a move. Hearing this news, Yi Chen's heart sank. The Battle King had died 500 years ago, and at that time, the Sky Tiger King had not become a Beast King yet. Therefore, he had not heard anything about the Sky Tiger King. Blood Tiger King was a Beast King 500 years ago. His Sky Tiger King's master. Of course, his battle strength isn't as frightening as Sky Tiger King's, but it's still not a small matter. One-on-one, He can kill king-grade space beasts. Compared to Sky Tiger King, Blood Tiger King made Yi Chen heave a sigh of relief. Although he still didn't have the slightest assurance against such an existence, at least it wouldn't make him despair. I know your battle strength is extraordinary. Perhaps you have the strength to contend against some kings who have just entered life and death realm. However, Sky Tiger King and Blood Tiger King are not people you can contend against. Lan Sanmei's intuition was extremely sharp. From the beginning to the end of the ranking battles, she felt that Yi Chen was hiding some of his strength. Therefore, she said this. I wonder what Beast King's White Wolf sect has? Yi Chen asked. What? You offended White Wolf sect? Lan Sanmei opened her rosy lips, dumbfounded. Yi Chen rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. I hope someone will come and save you. Lan Sanmei no longer had the strength to be astonished or worried. White Wolf sect also has two great beast kings. One is White Wolf King, and the other is Giant Wolf King. White Wolf King is the sect leader of White Wolf sect. His battle strength is a lot weaker than Sky Tiger King, but is still a lot stronger than Blood Tiger King. Giant Wolf King became a beast king 200 years ago. It's said that his ascension was rather strange. He didn't enter life and death realm through normal means. Therefore, his battle strength is only equivalent to an ordinary king. White Wolf King doesn't even allow him to enter the starry sky, fearing that he might fall. Neither Sky Tiger King nor White Wolf King are my opponents. Blood Tiger King is probably stronger than me. Only Giant Wolf King is a bit easier to deal with, but I'll have to go all out. Lan Sanmei's information was very useful to him. At the very least, it gave him an idea. If you can't do it, come to my demonic blade sec. Lan Sanmei couldn't bear to see Yi Chen fall. If Yi Chen didn't fall, it wouldn't be long before another stunning king appeared in this world. However, as soon as she said these words, Lan Sanmei regretted it. It wasn't that she didn't want to save Yi Chen, but demonic blade sect had its own rules. If Lan Sanmei acted like this, it would bring many enemies to demonic blade sect. Moreover, this was only her personal opinion. How could her master and supreme elder allow her to act recklessly? Forget it. I have a way to deal with it. Yi Chen wasn't an inflexible person. If he really couldn't win, he could take out the painting and ask Yuan Emperor to help him escape. With Yuan Emperor's strength, even titled monarchs would be apprehensive, not to mention Sky Tiger King and White Wolf King. Of course, it was best not to use the painting. After all, Yuan Emperor wasn't the Yuan Emperor of the past. He was merely an image sealed by a secret art. Every bit of power he used would diminish, and it couldn't be made up for. Before entering life and death realm, it was best to be cautious. Wait a moment. Lan Sanmei took out a jade talisman from her storage ring and operated her Zhen Yuan. One character after another entered the jade talisman, and with a fling of her hand, the jade talisman disappeared into the void. Bang! Right at this moment, the sky not far away suddenly split open, and a white-haired old man walked out. His body was surging with demonic power like a tidal wave. Chapter 872. Not good. It's Giant Wolf King, Lan Sanmei exclaimed in a low voice. Giant Wolf King was the supreme elder of White Wolf sect. 200 years ago, he had become a beast king. Although there was something strange about him becoming a beast king, he wasn't someone who had just entered life and death realm could compare to. It's Giant Wolf King of White Wolf sect. What is he doing here? I'm afraid he's here for young Wolf Lord. Many young experts of Blood Sky continent hadn't left yet. Some who were about to leave also stopped and watched from afar. The white-haired old man, Giant Wolf King, swept his gaze around before finally landing on Yi Chen. His eyes turned green and vertical. Did you kill Lang Er? According to young Wolf Lord's description, he recognized Yi Chen at a glance. If you're talking about young Wolf Lord, then I think so. At this point, denying was meaningless. Yi Chen nodded. Do you know your crime? Giant Wolf King roared. What crime? Kid, even now, you're still being stubborn. Life and death secret realm is a place for everyone to improve together. You killed my White Wolf sect's disciple, causing him to lose the opportunity to compete for the life and death stone. This is a crime. Do you know your crime? Giant Wolf King squinted his eyes, emitting an ominous aura. He wanted to kill me, but I killed him instead. If you want to talk about principles, I'll accompany you. Let's see if I'm guilty or not. If I say you're guilty, then you're guilty. Don't try to argue. Now, I'll give you a choice. Come back to White Wolf Sect with me and suffer for 100 years. After 100 years, I'll set you free. Giant Wolf King didn't give Yi Chen a chance to argue and decided that he was guilty. 100 years. Lan Sanmei's expression changed. 100 years later, everything would have changed. This was equivalent to erasing a person's talent and potential. Sorry, not even a year. Yi Chen shook his head. It's not up to you. As a Yarrow King, the Giant Wolf King naturally could not brazenly kill Yi Chen. Capturing him was his goal this time. With a flash, the Giant Wolf King appeared in front of Yi Chen in the blink of an eye. He extended his right hand and a boundless binding force burst out, forming a sphere of Yarrow energy around Yi Chen. Grappling martial art, trapping palm. The sphere formed by demonic energy rapidly compressed. Yi Chen immediately felt a huge pressure coming from all directions. If he didn't react immediately, this sphere of demonic energy would compress him into a ball, making him unable to move. Naturally, he would lose his ability to fight. He would be at the mercy of the demonic energy, unable to do anything. Sword domain. Congealing water. At this critical moment, Yi Chen's battle strength erupted. He released his sword domain, slowing down the speed of the demon power sphere's compression and buying himself a chance. At the same time, he pulled out the evil vanquishing sword with his right hand and slashed out. The pale golden light was not dazzling, nor did it give people a breathtaking feeling. However, the demon power sphere was immediately pierced through by this slash. Peng! The Giant Wolf King's palm collided with the evil vanquishing sword, creating ripples and cracks in the space. What a strange sword energy. The Giant Wolf King retreated with his right hand behind his back. If one observed carefully, one would notice that his right hand was slightly trembling. The clothes on his right arm were also slightly damaged. A Yarrow King is indeed a Yarrow King. Blood leaked out from the corner of Yi Chen's mouth as his entire body was sent flying. As for that demon power sphere, it had long since crumbled. In the first exchange between the two, Yi Chen was only slightly inferior. What? Impossible? The young experts present wished that they could wipe their eyes to see if they were hallucinating. With the Giant Wolf King's strength, he was actually unable to suppress Yi Chen. After sending the latter flying, he was also sent flying. He has reached the third layer of life and death chamber. Tai Kuangzuan's eyes shone. Although they all had life and death stones, the speed of improvement of each person's mental state was different. Some people could increase their realm very quickly, while others couldn't even increase their realm for several months. There were even some who couldn't increase their realm at all. After the ranking battle, 10 people had obtained life and death stones. However, within 20 days, no one could increase their realm because the time was too short. After all, one needed to refine 4 life and death stones to reach the third layer of life and death chamber. Obviously, Yi Chen didn't reveal his cultivation base when fighting young Elephant Lord. With his cultivation base at the second layer of life and death chamber, he finished off his opponent with 2 sword moves. Good kid. No wonder you're so arrogant. However, you've found the wrong target. The Giant Wolf King's right arm returned to normal as his tone turned cold. Giant Wolf King, if you leave now, you can still save some face. After clashing head-on with the Giant Wolf King, Yi Chen clearly understood the latter's explosive demonic power. It was indeed powerful, but not undefeatable. You're courting death. I've decided. I'll bring you back to White Wolf Sect and make you suffer the pain of having your tendons pulled out and your skin peeled off every day. The Giant Wolf King roared. His surging demonic power exploded, creating numerous cracks in the space. 100 Wolf Sky Trampling Palm. With a slap, hundreds of demonic power giant wolves flew out, rushing toward Yi Chen. Each of them contained an enormous amount of demonic power. Only demonic beasts could squander their energy like this. If it were a human life and death king, unless their cultivation base exceeded 500 years, each attack would consume several % of their energy. Facing the numerous demonic power giant wolves, Yi Chen pushed his sword domain to the limit. The sword pressure caused their speed to sharply decrease. Then, he waved his sword, causing the space to distort and condense into a mirror. Bewitching mirror shattering. Shatter. Peng. The mirror exploded, and all the demonic power giant wolves shattered. Swish. Using sword steps, Yi Chen's figure shuttled out like a sword light, arriving before the giant wolf king in a flash and thrusting his sword. Autumn water sword art's second style, congealing water. Not good. The giant wolf king promptly shattered the space, wanting to enter the void. However, under the pressure of the sword domain, the space had solidified a lot, causing his speed to slow down a bit. Thus, Yi Chen's sword pierced through his protective demonic power. Immediately, an extremely condensed sword energy penetrated his protective demonic power and entered his body. Puff. Spurting out a mouthful of blood, the giant wolf king was once again jolted out. His figure tumbled out, smashing into a huge mountain in desolate mountain range. The Beast King's protective demonic power is truly powerful. Even congealing water's sword energy couldn't penetrate it. It could only injure him a bit, but he'll recover soon. Although the giant wolf king seemed to be in a miserable state, Yi Chen was extremely clear that this sword attack couldn't do much to the giant wolf king. Of course, this was only Yi Chen's opinion. Including Lan Sanmai, all the spectating young experts were dumbfounded. For a long time, they couldn't utter a single word. He has the strength of a life and death king. It was unknown who said this sentence. Damn it. He was actually hiding his strength all along. With his strength, he wouldn't need to exhaust himself in the ranking battle. He could easily defeat anyone. Yi Chen was able to injure the giant wolf king not by relying on the sword domain or congealing water, but rather bewitching mirror shattering. Bewitching mirror shattering destroyed the giant wolf king's ace move, giving Yi Chen the opportunity to strike. If Yi Chen used bewitching mirror shattering in the ranking battle, who could be his opponent? Even Yi Chen's girlfriend in their eyes would be in danger. Bang! A large amount of rubble flew in the air as the giant wolf king rushed out and hovered in the air. Kid, you're dead for sure today. The giant wolf king had never suffered such humiliation before. To think that he, a majestic beast king, was injured by a kid who wasn't even a life and death king. If this matter spread out, his reputation would be ruined. The immense humiliation ignited his killing intent. Regardless of the unwritten rules, he hardened his heart and decided to kill Yi Chen on the spot. Aoo. Facing the sky, the giant wolf king let out a howl. His body flipped in the air and turned into an 80-meter-long, 10-meter-tall giant wolf. The giant wolf's eyes were like two searchlights as they converged into a beam of light. That sturdy body, metal-like hair, and blade-like claws all displayed his formidable battle strength. Standing motionless, the giant wolf king clawed at the space with his claws. Swoosh! In the next moment, the giant wolf king dashed toward Yi Chen. His huge body allowed him to move faster than a human. His entire body faded away, leaving behind only a translucent gray shadow. How could Yi Chen let him get close? Holding the evil vanquishing sword with both hands, he slashed out. The space was distorted and compressed, turning into a mirror. The giant wolf king's body froze in the mirror. Peng! The mirror shattered, and the giant wolf king's body was covered in wounds. Blood flowed out like a stream. Recover. Activating the undying body, the blood immediately flowed back into the giant wolf king's body. The wounds on his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his hair grew back. Blood-severing ghost finger. Seeing this, Yi Chen wasn't the least bit surprised. If beast kings were so easy to defeat, they wouldn't be called beast kings. Spreading his feet apart, Yi Chen's entire being turned cold and austere. His aura condensed, as if there was a huge black hole hidden within his body, restraining his aura and preventing it from leaking out. An astonishing scene occurred. Behind Yi Chen, a white-robed ghost figure appeared. The ghost figure's face was blurry, and it didn't have a face. It grinned, revealing a pitch-black mouth. The eerie ghost laugh seemed to exist between reality and illusion. His left index finger curved like a hook, and Yi Chen slashed out. Following this movement, the white-robed ghost figure's left hand stretched out, disappearing into the void. When it reappeared, it was already in front of the giant wolf king, probing into his body. Then, it grabbed out a large amount of qi and blood. Awoo! The giant wolf king was terrified. What kind of secret art was this? It could actually grab out his qi and blood through space. Others might not know, but he was the clearest. Although he was a beast king, he didn't become one through normal means. The beast king's qi in his body had infused with his flesh and blood. There was still a small portion of ordinary flesh and blood, which was his weakness. However, this weakness was inside his body, so the giant wolf king wasn't worried. However, Yi Chen's secret art exposed his weakness. If it weren't for this weakness, the ghost hand wouldn't have been able to grab out his qi and blood. It would have only been able to grab out some beast king's qi and blood, because the beast king's qi and beast king's qi were indistinguishable. After a large amount of qi and blood was grabbed out, the giant wolf king's vitality immediately declined, and exhaustion appeared on his face. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.